The Anodyne Necklace by Martha Grimes. It was a dead time in the London Underground, after lunch and before rush hour, when the last plaintive notes of a Chopin nocturne floated from Katie O'Brien's violin down the tiled corridor. Anything drifting in the air of the Wembley Notts tube station, besides wind you could taste the soot in, was a rare occurrence. She plucked the strings and thought of what to play next. Ruefully, she glanced down to check the contents of the open violin case. Paganini hadn't earned her any 10p pieces. Neither had Beethoven. At this rate, she would never save enough, not even for a new lipstick, much less for a pink satin shirt, she fancied. It had taken 6 months of playing here just to collect the money for the jeans and blouse she was wearing. Katie O'Brien plucked the strings of her violin and wondered if it was worth playing anything at all. Across from her was an Evita poster. Evita wore a strapless gown, her arms shot straight up in the air in a sort of victory pose. Microphones bristled in front of her. A moustache had been penciled in over her pearly lips, prominent nipples had been drawn on the bodice, and between the upraised hands were a hammer and sickle. Katie heard footsteps in the distance and tucked the violin under her chin. As the steps came nearer down the windy tunnel, she started in on Don't Cry for Me, Argentina, hoping it would be more popular than the nocturne. She closed her eyes, simulating total absorption in the music. After a bit, she saw the feet halt in front of a grate below the poster, and added a few unscored flourishes to her song, waiting for the ping of coins in the violin case. Pretending indifference to money, she didn't look up. That was why she didn't see it coming. The brutal blow to the back of her head buckled her knees, and the dirty ochre-coloured floor of the tunnel came up to slap her in the face. Darkness swept over her like sand, more and a little more. Before she was totally buried in it, she had time to wonder, almost whimsically, if Evita had stepped out of her poster, lowered the arms holding the hammer, and then hurried off, back to the Argentine. Don't cry for me. The small woolly dog trotted across Littlebourne Green, with its teeth clamped around its latest treasure. The dog belonged to no one in the village, but had been seen digging under the Craigie sisters' rose bushes, or chasing mice or elves in the Horndean wood. When the little dog saw a thin figure come out of the sweet shop, it rushed in a frolicsome way towards her. He recognized Miss Augusta Craigie, the one whose rose bushes he had lately left in tatters. Augusta Craigie tried to shoo it off. She quite loathed the dog. The dog merely took the waves and flourishes as a friendly offer to romp. It barked and let the bone fall at Miss Craigie's feet. She started to kick it away, but the tip of her sensible shoe stopped just short of kicking. She looked closer at the bone and determined it was not a bone, but a finger. The Hartfield police were there within 10 minutes of the call from the village. But no matter what blandishments they used, bits of red meat, head pattings, and so on, the little dog was not about to lead them to the rest of the body. Superintendent Richard Jury was stuffing an extra pair of socks into a duffel bag, preparatory to his weekend in Northamptonshire, when the telephone rang. He stared at the phone. No one in his right mind would be calling at 7:15 on a Saturday morning, unless it was something he definitely did not want to hear. He listened to 4 more rings, telling himself not to pick it up, but then, in the manner of all humans who are convinced the one call gone unanswered must be the call, the hotline from the universe, Jury weakened and plucked up the receiver. Jury here. Superintendent Jury. The voice did not belong to God, although its owner at New Scotland Yard might have contested this. In plummy accents, Detective Chief Superintendent Racer began to set Jury up for the fall. Well, well, not left yet, lad? I wondered why London was still so happy. Jury refused to rise to the bait. I was just finishing packing. Well, you can just leave out the pink coat, Jury. You're not going to Northants. Racer, who considered himself very county, assumed anyone with a title and a house the size of Ardry End must invariably ride to hounds. "I don't quite take your meaning," said Jury, who took Racer's meaning perfectly. The phone was in the kitchen, and Jury was now leaning on the open fridge door, inspecting the stark interior. One chicken leg, congealed in a puddle of grease, and a half-pint of milk. "My meaning, Jury, is that you're going to Hertford, not Northants, place called—" While Racer turned from the phone to have a mumbled conversation on the other end of the wire, Jury took up the chicken leg, wondering if the role of the forlorn, possibly starving policeman fit his overall image, decided it didn't, slammed the fridge door shut, and waited for Racer to get down to business. "Littleborn," came the irascible voice, and when Jury didn't immediately respond, said, "Jury?" "Sir?" "Are you being sarcastic, Jury?" "Sir?" "Don't sir me, lad. You never did when you were inspector, so you damn well wouldn't be doing it now. I don't have time for your warped, and I might add, unprofessional sense of humour." "Littleborn, you got that? That's the one-eyed village you're going to. About 3 miles from Hartfield, where the swells go to buy antiques. There's a down train every half hour from Islington." "I'm not on call. You do know there is a rota." "Rota? I'm well aware there's a rota. You trying to teach your grandmother to suck eggs, Jury? Perkins is in hospital, and Jenkins is flat on his back with some kind of flu the Chinks are handing round. Hartfield police are short-handed, and it looks like they've got an especially nasty murder. Trouble is, they can't find the body." "Then how do they know they've got a murder? Someone gone missing or something?" "Listen, and I'll tell you. Some woman named Craigie was out walking her dog. No, wait a tick. Not her dog." Jury closed his eyes. Racer would not simply hand over the facts, he would chronicle it. The chief superintendent considered himself a raconteur of bardic proportions. "And then this woman comes out of a shop and tried to get the mutt out of her way, and he drops the bone in his mouth. Only—" There was a dramatic pause. Jury waited, inspecting the chicken leg with a sense of foreboding. Only it wasn't a bone. That had to be it. "It wasn't a bone," said Racer, with a good deal of relish. "It was a finger. Get cracking, Jury. Take Wiggins with you." "Sergeant Wiggins is in Manchester. He's visiting his people." "He's giving all the Mancunians the Black Death, that's what he's doing. I'll dig him out, never fear. With Wiggins, that would be literal. Well, I'm sorry to delay your weekend in the country, Jury. No hunting, no shooting for you. A policeman's life is full of grief." Ardry End was a manor house of rose-hued stone, seat of the Earls of Caverness, when there were Earls of Caverness, hidden in its own wood of September gold and russet, like a figure in an old tapestry. The tapestry was even more faded, though, on this particular September morning, grey with mists and rain, floating like gauze over Northamptonshire fields. It was dark enough that the lamps glowed dully behind mullioned panes of a downstairs room. Thus a passer in the rain might have looked with longing through the windows of this room in the east wing. One might have taken the room's 2 occupants, a nearly handsome man in his early 40s, a stout, dumpy woman in her late 60s, for mother and son, or old friend and young, or happy host and merry guest. One might have supposed that here was friendship, here was intimacy, here was conversation at its best. One would have been wrong. "You're becoming an alcoholic, Melrose. That's your 2nd shooting sherry," said Lady Agatha Ardry. "If mere numbers count, you're becoming a fairy cake. That's your 3rd, said Melrose Plant, the last in the line of the Earls of Caverness. He returned to perusal of a road map. She threw him a dark glance while she peeled the fluted paper from the little cake. "What are you doing?" "Reading a road map." "Why?" "Because it's got roads on it." "You're being funny, Plant." "I'm being literal, dear aunt." Melrose had found Hartfield, But where was this little-born village?
You know perfectly well what I mean. You're not thinking of going anywhere, are you? If you're going up to London, I should certainly like to go too. I've got a lot of shopping to do, and I want to stop in at Fortnum's and get some of their cakes.
Fortnum's don't do fairy cakes, Agatha.
Certainly they do.
Well, I expect we shall never know. Lady Ardrey regarded her nephew with suspicion, as if his remark held some nugget of meaning she must pry loose, like a gold filling from a tooth. Gold was not the least of Agatha's concerns, either. She had just finished appraising Plant's latest acquisition, a small gold statue. She picked it up again, and turned it every which way.
This must have been dear, Melrose.
I can show you the sales slip.
Don't be vulgar. I've no interest in what you give for things.
He resettled his spectacles on his nose and looked at her over the rim of his Waterford crystal glass. Melrose saw she now had her enormous purse open and was rooting through it, taking out and putting on the table all sorts of nondescript objects. Was she making room for the gold statue? Melrose occasionally visited her cottage in Plague Alley, partly as a gentlemanly gesture, partly to see some of his belongings. How she managed to get whole clumps of furniture out of Ardrey End without his knowing was a mystery he had never solved. One day he would cycle up the drive to find a removal van in front of the door. Well, Ardrey End was enormous, and he didn't really care, so long as she left the portraits in the gallery and the ducks in the pond. Then he spied something she had just transferred from purse to table.
Isn't this mine? Yours? Yours? My dear Plant, whatever would I be doing with your calling card case?
I don't know. That's why I asked.
I'm not sure I care for what you're implying.
I'm not implying anything. I'm saying you took my visiting card case.
You don't remember?
Remember what?
Your dear mother, Lady Marjorie.
I remember my mother, yes. That was her visiting card case. Melrose opened his own gold cigarette case and lit a cigarette. Are you going to tell me Mother gave it to you?
Your dear mother, the Countess of Cavernous.
You have a way of reminding me of particulars of my family history that suggest you believe I cannot sort them out. I remember that my mother was the Countess of Cavernous. My father was the 7th Earl of Cavernous, and your late husband, the Honourable Robert Ardrey—
Stop trying to be funny again, my dear Plant.
Allow me to continue. Robert Ardrey was my uncle, and I, to everyone's consternation, am no longer the 8th Earl. There, now, all shipshape and Bristol fashion.
Kindly do not use such sordid, lower-class expressions. Your dear mother—
My mother was indeed dear, and she swore like a scullery maid.
No respect for the family. Never had.
You're here, dear aunt? She played for time by rearranging the falls of bright-leaved chiffon, totally inappropriate for the day, and calling for Riven, Melrose's butler. Why are you dressed for an afternoon on the lawn, Agatha? And where did you get that amethyst brooch? That looks like Mother's, too. Riven entered, and she requested some more cakes. She would stagger her 11s right into luncheon if he weren't careful, Melrose knew. Riven shot her a glance like a poisoned arrow and swanned out of the room. With that interruption, she could now deftly turn the subject away from amethyst brooches.
I noticed Lady Jane Hayhurt paying special attention to you last Sunday.
Since Lady Jane was a 58-year-old maiden lady with prominent teeth and receding chin, Agatha no doubt thought it safe to imply a possible liaison between the lady and Melrose. I've no interest in Lady Jane, but I shall find someone one day, never fear. The Ardrey Plants have always married late.
Marriage? Who ever said anything of marriage? You're a confirmed bachelor, Melrose, at 43.
42. He had found Littlebourne on the map and was ascertaining the best route.
Anyway, you're rooted in your behaviour, and I really don't think it would be likely that any sort of woman will put up with your odd little ways. And there's no one round here for you to marry.
Certainly, he thought. She had convinced herself Melrose was just waiting to die, so that he could turn over Ardry End, its grounds and gardens, its crystal and calling card cases, its armoires and amethysts, to her, his only living relative. And not even a blood relative. And not even English. Agatha was a transplanted American, not, however, of Jamesian sensibility. Beneath his dressing gown, Melrose was wearing his travelling clothes. He had meant to get off around 9, but he had had to spend a bit of time stalling her, putting her, indeed, off the scent. If she knew he was going to meet Superintendent Jury, she would be hiding out in the trunk of the Rolls. It had been sitting garage for an age. Melrose had decided to take it as part of a cover he had not yet made up. You never knew when a Rolls would come in handy. He smiled.
"What's that smirk for?"
"Nothing." He folded his map. She thought she was such a dab hand at murder. Ever since Jury, a chief inspector it had been then, had come to Long Piddleton, Agatha had been talking about the next case. Keeping her out of his hair required a cunning befitting Crippen or Neil Cream.
"Why are you looking at me that way, Plant?"
As she took another fairy cake, he saw her ring wink in the firelight. Where had she got that moonstone? The Littlebourne murders, as yet unfinished, had long provided practice in the gentle art of murder for Polly Praed. A moderately successful mystery story writer, she often, when her plots came unglued, would divert herself by practising various modes and styles of murder on the Bodenheims, singly or together. She favoured the denouement which had the entire village coming together to murder the titled family. At the moment she was walking down the High, considering a choice of weapons. About 20 or so feet away, parked outside of the tiny house which was Littlebourne's one-man police station, 2 men were getting out of a car. One was rather slight and ordinary-looking, though it was hard to tell, as he was apparently blowing his nose. But the other made her understand the meaning of being rooted to the spot. He was tall, and if not precisely handsome, but what else could one call him? When he reached to take something from the rear seat, was it a bag? Was he staying? A wind blew his hair. He scraped it across his forehead, and turned with the other man, and walked up the path to the station. Polly stared at the air, and felt mildly seasick. It was nearly 10. She often went into the station to have a chat with Peter Gear. They were friends. Sometimes they even went across to the Bold Blue Boy for a bit of lunch or a drink. What was to prevent her from simply marching up the walk and feigning surprise? "Oh, do excuse me, Peter, I didn't know." Her mind busily worked over the scene that would unfold. There would be the stranger's open-mouthed astonishment that she was that Polly Praed, a name which had never seemed to get much of a rise even out of her publisher, an appreciation of her wit, which reviewers put on a par with her plots, a quiet appraisal of her beauty, seldom commented on by anyone. At this point she was so deep into sparkling repartee inside the police station that she forgot she was still on the pavement until she heard the raised voices. She turned to look back toward the petrol station, where Sir Miles Bodenheim, dressed in +4s, was waving his swagger stick in the air, and Mr. Bister's face had turned the colour of the little red Mini he had apparently been working on. Sir Miles made one last gesture with the stick and started down the pavement, headed in her direction. Quickly she crossed to the other side and shot into the Magic Muffin, fortunately open that day. It was a tea-room run by Miss Celia Pettigrew, a gentlewoman of slender means, who kept very capricious business hours. Polly watched the progress of Sir Miles, who was marching down the other side of the street and was now just by the police station walk. She could have died. Coming down the walk and running bang up against Miles Bodenheim were Peter Gear and the 2 strangers. The idea that this brief encounter should fall not to her, but to Miles, who deserved prussic acid in his morning egg, made her want to scream. She watched as Peter Gear and the others manoeuvred around Sir Miles and separated themselves from him, which must have been like picking a limpet off a rock. The 3 crossed the street and Littlebourne Green and out of her line of vision. Her face was nearly mashed against the glass.
"Whatever are you staring at, dear?"
The reedy voice of Celia Pettigrew pulled Polly back from the window.
"Might I have some tea, Miss Pettigrew? And a muffin?"
To resist further temptation, Polly had seated herself with her back to the windows, so that when the bell tinkled again, her heart leaped within her. Could his course have been deflected, walking across the green? No, it was only Sir Miles, come to hector Miss Pettigrew within an inch of her life. Although Miles Bodenheim vied only with his wife Sylvia as the first one to dispatch in the Littlebourne murders, she was almost glad to see him now. It never occurred to Miles that anyone wouldn't be, so without preamble he dropped his stick and cap on the table and sat down.
"Saw you come in here. Thought I'd join."
He twisted his large frame in the chair and bellowed,
"You've got customers out here, Miss Pettigrew."
Polly closed her eyes as the sharp rattle and shattering of dishes came from the curtained alcove.
"Well, Miss Praed, and are you working on your new thriller? Been a long time since you've had one out, but I expect the last reviews put you off your feed a bit, didn't they? Look at it this way, though. It's not what those idiots think, it's the sale, what? They weren't too brisk, were they? Sylvia tells me all the ones in the Hartfield shop are still there. Oh, well."
He ran his hands against his hair, smoothing it. There was a bit of dried egg on his lapel. Since there usually was, Polly wondered if it were the same dried egg bit, or fresh from the morning.
"Where is that idiot woman?"
He wheeled around in his chair again, as Miss Pettigrew shuddered through the drapery, looking extremely pale.
"Sir Miles, you needn't have shouted like that. You gave me the most awful fright." "You need something for your nerves. Bring another cup. There's enough in that pot for two. What are those things?"
He poked at what were quite obviously muffins on the plate she deposited before Polly.
"Carrot muffins." "Good God, woman! Bring me a scone."
"I don't do scones, Sir Miles."
"Oh, bring me some of that anchovy toast."
"I only have that in the afternoon, as you know." Stone-faced, Miss Pettigrew retreated behind her curtain.
"Whole village has gone mad, far as I can see. First it's those beastly letters. Didn't write 'em yourself, did you? Rather your line, isn't it?"
"Poison pen letters are not exactly the same thing as writing mysteries," said Polly. Polly was saved from stuffing the muffins down his throat by the fresh tinkling of the bell over the tea-room door. The next person to enter the magic muffin was Emily Louise Perk, 10 years old, with no sign she had grown since she was 8. Her small-boned frame and triangular face, mournful brown eyes, strings of yellow hair hanging about her pointed chin, shabby little hacking jacket and jeans, all proclaimed her to be quite a pitiful child. Emily Louise Perk was anything but pitiful. Her unkempt appearance had nothing to do with a neglectful parent, or a poor one. If her hair never looked combed and her costume never changed, it was because Emily Louise was up long before her mother, up before the rest of the village, up before God, seeing to her interests, chief among them being her pony, Shandy. Shandy was stabled, oddly enough, at Rookswood, the Bodenheim manor. Emily was permitted to keep her own pony there, in return for taking care of the Bodenheim horses. Thus, unlike the other village children, whom the Bodenheims gladly squashed like stray cats and dogs, Emily was permitted, metaphorically speaking, to live. And live she did, rather high on the hog, because she knew everything that went on in Littlebourne. She was not a gossip, but she certainly knew the going rate of exchange. News flowed back and forth through her 4-foot frame, as if she were an electrical wire. Polly happily called out to her, and pulled a chair round for her to sit in. As Emily sat down, Miles said,
"Thought you were supposed to be up at the house, carrying Julia's horse."
His iron-grey brows furrowed. No frown, however, was any match for Emily Louise's. She always appeared to be in a brown study.
"Today's Saturday. I don't do spit on Saturday. Oh, it's carrot again. I wish I had a hot cross bun."
She clamped her hands atop her head and looked at Polly. Polly called to Miss Pettigrew, who, seeing Emily, immediately procured a plate of buns and a fresh pot of tea.
"Thank you,"
said Emily, who did not place herself above manners.
"There's a policeman in the village, a new one." "I know," snapped Sir Miles. "Met the chap already."
"He's from Scotland Yard." Polly's mouth dropped open.
"What's he doing here? I mean, is he staying?"
Apparently unable to supply any more information, Sir Miles passed it off with a general comment about the inefficiency of police in general.
"All running about cock-a-hoop, none of them seem to know what they're doing. If we had to depend on Peter Gear for protection, we'd all be dead in our beds."
Emily ate her bun.
"He's going to find that body, I expect. He's staying at the Bold Blue Boy. They dropped off their stuff there. He's a police superintendent."
"Did you, happen to hear his name?" asked Polly. Emily did not provide this essential bit of information. Instead, she drained her cup and shoved it towards Polly.
"Tell my fortune, please."
Polly was loath to drop the subject, but perhaps the tea-leaf reading could be turned to that account. Sir Miles sighed hugely, as if they had chained him to his chair, forcing him to listen to this nonsense. "I see a man, a stranger." Emily's chin rested on her clenched fists.
"What's he look like?"
The eternal pucker between her brows deepened.
"Tall, good-looking, about 40.
"That old?" "Chestnut hair, brown eyes."
"Grey,"
corrected Emily.
"Rubbish," contributed Miles. "Go on," said Emily.
"I see some kind of danger, some sort of mystery." Polly shrugged her shoulders. Ordinarily her imagination was sprightlier, but today she couldn't seem to make it click.
"He's got a nice smile and a nice voice,"
said Emily, supplying the missing details.
"Do policemen make much money? I can't marry anyone who hasn't got a lot of money. I'd need it for the horses. One day I'm going to have a lot of horses."
Detective Superintendent Richard Jury had been in Littlebourne under an hour, and had already turned 2 of its women to jellies. It was not the police who found the body to which the finger had lately belonged. It was Miss Ernestine Craigie, sister to Augusta. Ernestine had gone to the Horndean Wood, as was her usual habit, in her Wellingtons and anorak, and with binoculars swinging round her neck. Ernestine was not only president, but was heart, soul, and muscle of the Hartfield Royal Birdwatchers Society. Except for the sort of mucking about Miss Craigie had been doing, the Horndean Wood was a good-for-nothing, boggy place. Good for nothing, apparently, but bird-watching and murder. When Superintendent Jury and Constable Gear arrived on the scene, they found a hard knot of police and dogs, all seeming to jockey for position. One of the men peeled off from the group and walked towards them.
"Hello, Peter."
He put out his hand to Jury.
"I'm Carstairs."
Detective Inspector Carstairs had a beaked nose and somewhat predatory air.
"We found her not half an hour ago. Or to be more precise, one of the local ladies found her. I had one of our people take her back to her cottage. She held up awfully well, I must say. Still, it's a shock. She's there whenever you want to speak to her. Come along, then."
The medical examiner was a woman, and she was in the process of finishing up her preliminary examination, tossing her comments over her shoulder to an assistant who stood marking items on a chart of a human form.
"Hairs adherent to this hand, bag it. Nothing on this hand, but I'd bag it too."
The reason, Jury thought, there might have been nothing on that hand was because it had no fingers. The medical examiner dropped it, quite casually, back on the tree stump, with the direction, "Bag each finger separately." Jury took a step forward, but was stopped by her assistant saying, "Don't step on that finger, please, sir." He looked down and drew his foot back quickly. It was then he noticed the 2 separate, severed fingers. One had rolled off the stump. The victim, a youngish woman in her late 20s or early 30s, lay in the shallow and muddy water of the stream. One side of her face was turned down in the water. The water itself was rusty with blood. Except for the one hand, the rest of the body appeared to have escaped mutilation. The cyanosed complexion told Jury she had been strangled. The doctor rose and dusted her knees free of twigs and leaves. She intoned her findings to Jury. Dead, I'd say, on a prelim, about 36 hours. I put it at roughly between 8 and midnight Thursday. What about the hand, Doctor? Axe, apparently. Was done in a single blow. That one, there. She pointed to a small, double-bladed axe lying in the grass. Any ideas why the killer would go to the trouble of cutting off the fingers? Asked Jury. She shook her head, snapped her bag shut, a woman of few words. Well, it couldn't be fingerprints, said Carstairs, or he'd have done both hands, and taken away the fingers. The axe, Gear tells me, belongs to Miss Ernestine Craigie, the one who found the body. Could it have been a woman? Asked Jury of the medical examiner. Could it have been a woman? Yes, Superintendent. You'll find that we can do all sorts of things. Dress ourselves, ride two-wheelers, do murders. Chalk one up for women's lib, he guessed. Sorry. Sergeant Wiggins and Peter Gear tramped toward them, away from the clutch of Hartfield policemen looking the ground over. Wiggins looked down at the mutilated hand as the woman was being wrapped in a rubber sheet. Why do you suppose he cut off the fingers, sir? He wasn't just saying goodbye. They were back in Peter Gear's one-room office on the High, warming their hands around mugs of tea and coffee. No identification, said Carstairs. Labels in her clothes were Swan and Edgar and Marks and Sparks. Anyway, you could tell from the quality she didn't do her shopping at Liberty's. Looks pretty much the shop girl type to me. Bit heavy on the jewellery, too. Anything to tell us where she comes from was this. Carstairs drew a small envelope from his pocket and shook the contents out on the desk. A day returned to London, found it down in the coat lining. Apparently slipped through a hole in the pocket. Jury looked at the date. September 4th, 2 days before. She wasn't a local, then. Well, say she was, said Wiggins, holding his cup close to his nose and breathing in steam. Still, it's not likely she'd be having a walk along that footpath in the dark, would she? In that wood? And dressed the way she was? Carstairs looked at Wiggins as if he were a pile of unwashed socks, but had to agree nonetheless. The Craigie woman said she must have passed by that spot when she was out that night having a tramp in the woods. What time? Asked Peter Gear. She's uncertain about that. 9 or 9:30, possibly even 10. At any rate, after dark. So that puts her out there at the time of the murder, sir, Wiggins said to Jury. Gear laughed. Well, I must admit, she's certainly got enough brute force for it. Only, wait a moment, you surely don't think this was done by a local, do you? Maybe not, but you've had your share of troubles here, Peter. What about these? Carstairs reached inside his pocket and dropped a brown packet on the table. Have a look, Superintendent. It was a plain brown mailing envelope, postmarked in Hartfield and addressed to the Littlebourne sub-post office. Jury opened it and took out a packet of letters held together with a rubber band. He flipped through the envelopes and said, Crayon? Interesting, isn't it? Much more difficult for forensics than ink or typewriter impressions. They haven't come up with anything yet. Jury opened and read the first, written in green crayon, to a Miss Polly Praed, Sunnybank Cottage. It would appear Miss Praed has been getting up to all sorts of mischief without ever leaving her home. Gin? Dope? He set it aside and picked up the second, this one in orange, to a Ramona Way. Not very long, are they? And not very naughty either, said Carstairs, except for the ones to Augusta Craigie and Dr. Ridley. Hard to write for very long in crayon. Augusta Craigie's letter was done in purple. Miss Craigie gets around, doesn't she? So far, 3 different men have been sighted here, in various states of dress and undress, said Jury. If you knew Augusta, that's Ernestine's sister, you'd see it's very unlikely, said Gear. She was rather proud of her letter, I'd say. We were wondering if perhaps she was the writer, just so she could send one to herself. Seems a thin motive for writing all the others, Peter. Jury opened the next letter. You got one too, I see. Blushing, Gear scratched his neck with the stem of his pipe. Pretty dull, done in grey, which is all my personal life deserves, I suppose. Skullduggery. There's an old-fashioned word for you. When I was working for LT. Carstairs clucked his tongue at Peter in mock reproof. The one to Ridley is a dandy. He's the local medic, young chap, attractive, blue. The jury read the detailed description of what Dr. Ridley was doing with Ramona Way. Is she that sexy? Good looking, said Peter, but a bit of an iceberg. She runs an antiques business in Hartfield. So these are ordinary Crayolas you could find in any W.H. Smith's, or any home with kiddies in it? Said Jury. Or without kiddies. Peter Gear opened the desk drawer and took out some crayons and a couple of colouring books, which he tossed on the table. Not mine, actually. They belong to a little girl here, has a passion for colouring, Emily does. She leaves the damn things everywhere. I found these on the window ledge. Jury shook his head as he reread the letter to Augusta Craigie. These letters don't ring true. They're like a game or something. They don't even sound serious. People round here are taking them seriously, believe me, said Peter. Carstairs looked at his watch, set down his cold coffee cup, and raised 2 fingers to his cap. Thanks for the coffee, Peter. I see you still make it out of steel shavings. He smiled and was gone. Sir Miles Bodenheim's broad face and chest appeared gargoyle-like in the pane of the door before he ushered himself into the constable's office like a stiff September breeze.
Peter, this is preposterous. I've been given to understand someone has been found dead in the Horndean Wood.
Jury recognised in Sir Miles Bodenheim, introduced to Jury with noticeable lack of enthusiasm by Gear, the sort of village gentry which has nothing to do with its time other than to take itself very seriously. Did you have some information you thought relevant, Sir Miles?
I know nothing, except I cannot understand why police find it necessary to cut across my south pasture. They're slogging about over my property as if they owned it.
Is your property near the Horndean Wood, then?
It certainly is. Borders it, as a matter of fact. Rookswood has quite extensive grounds.
On the night before last, did you happen to see or hear anything unusual?
Only Miss Way in Dr. Ridley's office. Seems a bit late for an appointment, wouldn't you say?
I was speaking more of something happening in the wood, Sir Miles.
Nothing. I do not prowl the wood at night, keeping track of trysts, Superintendent. And why it's necessary to call in Scotland Yard is beyond me. But I might as well save my breath to cool my porridge.
Jury imagined it would be the first time he'd ever saved it.
I understand it was a particularly brutal crime. I've just come from tea with Augusta Craigie and got all the details. Terrible. The arm simply...
He made a clicking sound and took a swipe at his own arm with his stick.
Can't think why anyone would do a thing like that. But she was a stranger. Ah, well.
The implication was that strangers had no one but themselves to blame if they lost their arms.
Odd, isn't it? What would anyone have been doing out there in the Horndean Wood, except for us bird-watchers in the society? I can't see there'd be any reason for anyone to be there. My wife, Sylvia, agrees. After all, there's only the one public footpath, and Sylvia says she nearly sunk down a foot while she was out with the society.
Jury took it from the expression on Gear's face that Sylvia would not have been missed if she had sunk up to her neck. He cut him off by asking, "You're saying that this wood has never been a place of picnics or lovers' meetings?"
Lovers? I should hope not.
The suggestion was that lovers like rabies were unknown in Littlebourne village.
You'll be staying, I expect, Superintendent?
Yes, at the Blue Boy. Sir Miles' grey moustache twitched.
Oh, not the Blue Boy, surely. It's not properly heated, and although Mrs. O'Brien does prepare a fairly decent meal, well, I don't really approve of women publicans, do you? I know women are just chock-a-block all over the place these days, but Mary O'Brien... You heard, of course, what happened to her daughter. I'd almost forgot myself, what with everything else that's happened. And I suppose, Peter, the police aren't any forrarder about that either, are they? Well, Superintendent, I should like to stop here and chat, but I must be going.
Then, having satisfied himself that he had set straight the nation's police forces, Miles Bodenheim threw open the door and sallied forth to mix hot air with cold. "Peter, what happened to the girl?" asked Jury, putting the packet of letters in his raincoat pocket. "Katie O'Brien. She's the daughter of the woman who runs the Blue Boy. She's been going up to London twice a month for violin lessons, and must have been getting some pocket money by playing her fiddle in the tube station."
"Stupid thing to do,"
said Sergeant Wiggins, wiping his nose with his large handkerchief. "Yes, well, someone landed a blow on her skull. They say it's a miracle she's not dead, though I can't say she's much better off the way she is. She's in the Fulham Road Hospital in a coma. Been like that for nearly 2 weeks now, and it doesn't look good." As they stood up to leave, Jury asked, "Where did it happen?" "In the East End, Wembley Knots tube station. The music teacher lives there somewhere." Wiggins popped a cough drop in his mouth and offered the box round.
"Not the healthiest part of town for a young girl to be mucking about in."
No, she wouldn't. Yes, she would. No, she wouldn't. Emily Louise Perk was standing on the green, watching the door of the police station through which Miles Bodenheim had just departed. She was thinking about Scotland Yard. Her frown deepened. Even for Emily it was a huge frown. If she could only find out what the police knew, then maybe she could figure out if what she knew was important. The door to the station opened again, and he came out. She would have to be careful. Scotland Yard could get information out of anyone. They could get secrets out of Shandy if they had to, out of the very trees if they wanted. And Emily had a secret. The trouble was, it wasn't really her secret. It was Katie O'Brien's. The woman who set their pints on the table at the Blue Boy was dark, middle-aged, and Jury thought had probably once been pretty, perhaps only 2 weeks ago, before her daughter's accident. Peter Gear, who had been telling Jury about Katie O'Brien, continued, "What Mary couldn't understand was, when they found her in the tube station, knocked unconscious, she wasn't wearing the clothes she set out in. Mary always made her wear dresses. Katie changed somewhere and was wearing a bright pink shirt and jeans. There were cigarettes, too, in her shopping bag, and one of those books girls like to read nowadays. Heart, Wind, Romance, I think it was. Well, her mother never let her smoke, nor read books like that." "Well, they're pretty innocent," said Sergeant Wiggins, looking a bit healthier now he had some food. "Not one of your bosom rippers." At Jury's questioning look, he said, "Well, you remember Rosalind Van Rensselaer? I read a few of hers." He turned his attention back to his sandwich. "What kind of jeans, Peter?" "What kind? Blue jeans. They're all alike." "Well, the hell they are. Most girls nowadays wouldn't be caught dead in anything but designer jeans. What kind?" "Well, I don't know, do I? Why is it important?" "I'm just wondering how long she had to play for money in the London Underground to buy them." "Jordache," said Mary O'Brien, twisting the corner of her apron as if it might have been the neck of her daughter's assailant. "And a pinky purple shirt. I couldn't understand it. Her dress was in her shopping bag." "Boyfriends? Did she have any?" "Well, she's only 16. I told her there'd be plenty of time later for that. Katie's a real musician. Her music means a lot to her. There was no one around here, no teacher good enough to teach her. I haven't got all that much, and she has to have the best. Katie helps out, too. She does odd jobs, mostly cleaning, for a lot of people. Miss Pettigrew, the Mainwarings, Peter Gear, Dr. Ridley, quite a few others." "The music teacher, what's his name?" "Cyril McHenry. Lives on Drum Street, not far from the tube station." She watched Wiggins write it down. "He says he didn't have any idea she was playing her violin for money." "Well, don't you believe him?" "I don't know what to believe. I'm surprised you're even interested. No one else is now. After those letters and now this murder in the Haundean Wood." "The London police won't forget, Mrs. O'Brien." "They say you can never tell what might trigger something for someone in a coma. I talk to her and play the music. You never guess what her favourite song is. Roses of Picardy. Katie's so old-fashioned." Jury wondered how she squared that with Jordache jeans and a bright pink shirt. Augusta Craigie, or the woman in the unruly garden whom Jury presumed to be Augusta, seemed to be doing something to a bed of primulas when he unlatched the gate. Except for the one little patch in which the woman worked, the rest of the yard was a jungle. "Miss Craigie?" She looked around at him, her mouth pursing in a small O. "I'm Superintendent Jury, Scotland Yard, CID. He showed her his warrant card. Immediately she pulled her collar up and her sleeves down, as if to cover any exposed skin. Hard to do, since Miss Craigie was already well covered, all in grey from her hair down to her lisle stockings. With her small eyes and sharp nose, she reminded Jury of a field mouse.
"You've come to see my sister. But I really don't think she's able. I mean, such a shock. You can imagine."
"Yes, I can. But perhaps we could have a talk?"
"We? Oh, yes, I suppose."
The look of the garden seemed to have reasserted itself inside the house. Everywhere there were birds, a pair of lovebirds in a wicker cage, stuffed ones under glass, or porcelain ones on mantel and shelves. Augusta Craigie, who had seated herself in a bulky, cretonne-covered chair, said,
"Ernestine is the president of the Hartfield Birdwatchers group. She's usually up before 5 and out with her binoculars. So you see, Inspector, it's perfectly natural she might have come across the poor woman."
Jury let the demotion pass and left her to embroider upon the circumstances.
"She was out making one of her little maps, you see, for the birdwatchers. We all use them when we go out together, usually in teams. If there's something like the speckled crackle, truly important."
That same sister seemed to be rousing, for there were thumpings and creakings and sounds of someone descending the stairs.
"That must be Ernestine. I don't know why she didn't faint dead away. Ernestine, you really should not be up."
If this were Ernestine blocking the archway, she didn't look as though she could be brought down by a gale wind. She was stout, square, determined. Any objections to her present course would obviously be beaten off with the blackthorn stick she carried. She was wearing a navy pea coat, buttoned tightly across her large frontage, and a knitted cap had been pulled down over her ears with such force that nothing but a grey fringe of hair and the barest hint of eyebrow showed.
"Out, of course,"
was her snappish answer to her sister's timid question as to where she was going.
"A nice lie down, that's all I needed. Just got to get the Wellingtons on." "But, Ernestine, you can't be going back to the Horndean Wood. This is the police from Scotland Yard, and he wanted to ask—"
"Why shouldn't I go back? The crackle won't wait forever. I expect police have tied it up by now. Right, Inspector?"
"We've taken the body away, ma'am, but you can't go back into that part of the wood yet."
"Why not? I'd like to know. The great speckled crackle is very nearly an extinct bird, sir. It's that part of the wood he'll return to, if any."
"I've a friend who saw a Spix's macaw once."
"But that's impossible. The Spix's macaw is only seen in Brazil."
She sat herself down, as if from shock. Maybe it simply got blown off course.
"I can't believe this person saw one. I'm an ornithologist and keep abreast of such things. I've heard no report of Spix's macaws. Describe one."
"Well, it was blue," he said. "Darker blue on the back and wings, and about, 2 feet or so long." There was a brief, amazed silence as Ernestine stared at Jury. "Tell me, Miss Craigie, you must have speculated on who this girl might be, or at least a reason for her to be walking in the wood."
"None whatever. Some shop girl, probably."
"Why do you say that?"
"I don't know. Just looked the type. Bit tartish, you know? All those bangles and earrings. Bedizened, beringed, and bejewelled, as our old mother used to say. But all from Woolworth is my guess."
"Perhaps," said Augusta, "it was the girl for Stonington."
"Stonington?" said Jury.
"Why, yes. That's the Kennington place. I heard Lady Kennington was looking for someone to do typing for her. Stonington's just the other side of the wood, on the Horndean Road. I'm quite sure the postmistress told me that she, Lady Kennington, I mean, had a prospect she was expecting to interview a day or two ago. Maybe this person in the wood was one of them." Jury's mind was on the Kennington place. Why did the name seem familiar? "Are you on the telephone?" he asked the Craigies.
"Of course," said Ernestine. "It's back in the study there. Mind you don't knock my maps about," she called to Jury's departing back.
"Stonington?"
said Inspector Carstairs with some surprise.
No one mentioned the woman's being for Stonington. The bus driver says he remembers a woman of that description getting off the Hartfield-Horndean bus in Littlebourne at dusk.
"This Kennington, I seem to have heard the name somewhere before," said Jury.
"It was in the papers about a year ago. Lord Kennington had a collection of jewels, among them an emerald, very rare, worth $250,000. The secretary, a villain named Tree, walked off with them. Or it, I should say. Poetic justice, maybe, but Tree was run down by a car a few days later. The necklace is still missing, as far as we know."
Jury thanked him and rang off. At the door, as Jury was handing them one of his cards, Augusta said, "I do hope this awful business won't postpone our church fete, will it? It's to be tomorrow, and I've got my tent and my costume all planned out."
"All kitted out in fortune-teller's rig. My sister, Madame Zostra. Damn silly business. If the church needs money, why doesn't it go whistle for it?"
Ernestine was studying Jury's card.
"Said you were inspector, didn't you? This says superintendent. What's the difference? You in charge of the whole boiling, or what?"
"Not much difference. Just look at it this way. Not all policemen are inspectors, and not all birds are crackles." "It was about a year ago," said Peter Gear, feet planted on the desk in the one-room police station. "It was Trevor Tree, Lord Kennington's secretary, called me sometime around about midnight, saying the place had been burgled. We searched the people, the house, the grounds. We didn't see what Tree could possibly have done with the stuff, except to toss it to someone waiting outside. Tree was a smooth fellow, a charmer, clever, sophisticated, very plausible. You know the type. I met him once or twice over at the Blue Boy, where he and Derek Bodenheim would play some sort of game. It wasn't the first time Lord Kennington had missed stuff. Some odds and ends of antique jewellery he'd had Tree buy from Ramona Way. Brooches, some Egyptian-like stuff, a ring shaped like a snake, a diamond in a gold setting, some lapis lazuli. Kennington thought he'd misplaced them himself, until this other thing happened. I didn't like Tree, not by half. Cheeky sort he was. He was showing the stuff he bought from Ramona Way round in the pub, saying what a bargain he'd got. To tell the truth, I wondered if he didn't have something going with her. 2 peas in a pod, those two." "You don't care for her, I take it," said Jury. "Oh, she's all right, I expect. Anyway, what's all this in aid of?" "I don't know. Littlebourne just seems to come in for more than its share of grief." Humming tunelessly, Jury waited on Polly Praed's stoop, and wondered when Melrose Plant might get there. He was rather surprised Plant hadn't turned up by now, as he had called him early this morning. The other half of Jury's mind was on the girl with the yellow hair. He was sure she was out there watching. Sunnybank Cottage's door opened. The woman looked, he thought, rather newly minted, in the sense of a make-up job that had the stamp of someone about to appear on a film set. Yet despite the layers of thick mascara and a totally inappropriate green-gold glitter of eyeshadow, he could see the eyes beneath it all were wonderful. Perhaps it was the film set notion that made him think of Elizabeth Taylor. The face might be otherwise unremarkable, but with the shimmering amethyst eyes, it would take a person of iron self-control even to notice the rest of her. Jury did, however. He was paid to. She was a rather petite, early middle-age-ish woman, in a twin-set the colour of drabbit, a nice mop of dark curls, apparently untamable. "Miss Praed?" "I'm Superintendent Jury, Scotland Yard, CID." He flicked his ID. This seemed to surprise her out of her pose of slinky nonchalance, one hand up the door-sill, the other drooping on her hip, but she said nothing. "Could I have just a word with you?" There was a feeble sort of wave of her arm, apparently inviting him in. Jury smiled the smile which had once prompted a 7-year-old girl to insist he have the remainder of her container of Smarties. It had the effect on Polly, unfortunately, of making her reach for a pair of ugly, horn-rimmed glasses with which she promptly covered her eyes. I interrupted your writing, I suppose. I'm sorry.
Don't be. I've just been practicing murders.
Practicing?
Like scales, you know. I practice on the Bodenheims. I'm calling it the Little-Bourne Murders.
Which one of them is your victim?
All of them. Sir Miles, Sylvia, and their children Derek and Julia. I've killed off each one 6 times. Guns, knives, faked auto accidents over cliffs, the lot. Right now I'm into poisons. Curare is nice. Cheese?
She thrust a plate toward him. He shook his head.
What did you say your name was?
Jury. I'm with Scotland Yard.
Are you? You're a detective.
That's right. I'm sure you heard about the woman found in the Horndean Wood this morning. She leaned toward Jury, her self-consciousness momentarily forgotten.
I suppose you're here because you think I wrote those letters. I bet a lot of people do, because I'm a writer.
I don't think they're nearly imaginative enough for you.
What did you say your name is?
Jury. And besides, had it been you, surely the Bodenheims would have got several apiece. Do you assume, Miss Praed, it was one of them who wrote the letters?
I doubt they can write.
Did you know Katie O'Brien?
Katie? You don't think she had anything to do with those letters?
It's doubtful, as they were postmarked the day after she was attacked.
I admit they are rather adolescent, and Katie was awfully put upon by Mary. I mean, repressed. But poison pen stuff, no. She was too nice. I mean, is. You see, we're talking about her as though she were dead. It's awful. If you want to know about Katie, you really ought to talk to Emily Louise Perk. Emily knows everything that goes on in this village, though it's not easy to get things out of her unless you've something to trade.
Trade?
Bits of information for goodies. You cost me 2 hot cross buns this morning.
I did.
She knew who you were before you'd had both feet out of the car, I bet.
So she hadn't really needed to ask him twice what his name was.
It's a compliment to know you thought me worth 2 hot cross buns. And a cup of tea.
From the moment of entering the Bodenheim drawing-room, it had been fairly clear to Jury why Polly Praed was writing the Little-Bourne Murders. 3 heads, those of Miles, Sylvia, and the daughter, had turned toward him as if he were royalty's looking-glass. The 4th didn't turn much at all. It was too busy looking bored. Derek Bodenheim sat slouched in a chair, his expression insolent, as if he were already disagreeing with whatever Jury might say.
"Who was she? Do you know yet?"
asked Derek, slouching further down in his chair. Having inherited what there was of his father's looks, Derek managed to dissipate them across a face that looked so soft and malleable it could have taken the imprint of a thumb. "That's what we're trying to establish. No one seems to have seen her here in the village."
"Except for Daddy and that silly bird-watching group, no one goes into the wood," said Julia.
She managed to lift her head as if it were quite the handsomest thing Jury would be likely to see in Little-Bourne.
"Silly? Nothing silly about the royal bird-watchers, my dear. Do you good to join it yourself," said her father.
Julia rolled her eyes upwards and tried to find an even more striking pose on the velvet couch, chosen, no doubt, because the blue matched both her shirt and her eyes. Sylvia set aside her teacup.
"There's no earthly reason for the woman to have been in the Horndean Wood. None."
Ergo, she made it sound, the woman wasn't there. "It's been suggested this person was on her way to Stonington." Sylvia gave Jury a smile as thin as the cucumber on the sandwiches.
"Why on earth would she be going there? And not through the wood? That's absurd. And not to see Lady Kennington, I dare say. I was at Stonington not 3 days ago to see if she wouldn't do something for our church fete. But as always, it was quite useless. The woman's a veritable recluse. Now her husband, Lord Kennington, seemed pleasant enough. You heard, I expect, about the theft of that jewellery about a year ago."
"Yes, apparently the secretary came under suspicion."
"Well, no wonder. Not a nice sort at all. You knew him a little, didn't you, Derek?"
She turned to her son, who did not bother to recognize her.
"As to those letters, Superintendent,"
said Sylvia, refocusing her damp gaze on Jury. Her eyes were the colour of fungi one is always afraid of picking in the wilds.
I can see why Ramona Way got one. Called herself a decorator. Has that tarted-up little shop on the row. But the woman's nothing in the world but a jumped-up little secretary from London. There's talk, too, about her and Freddie Mainwaring, but I'm sure he's got too much sense. I find her rather jolly, said Derek. His soft face split in a mocking smile.
I've always been able to keep an open mind on such subjects,
said Miles, his face turned to the ceiling as if about to receive the angel's blessings.
I suggest you would all do well to follow my example.
He smiled benignly and opened his mouth to say more, but Jury cut him short with a smile even more benign, having as it did the blessing of the Metropolitan Police Department.
Where were all of you on Thursday night?
2 nights ago, that is. They all looked at one another, and then at Jury, as if he were rather a rude child inquiring into his elders' affairs. After a moment of improved dismay, however, Derek seemed to enjoy the question immensely.
It appears the super thinks one of us had a hand in the dirty deed. As for myself, let's see, I was in the White Hart in Hartfield. Must be able to scare up some witnesses, though we were all so pissed.
Jury listened as the angels looked down.
Cora Binns, said Inspector Carstairs. It was shortly after you called that we got an identification. Not from Lady Kennington, we're checking that out, but from a Mrs. Beavers. That's the Binns woman's landlady who got worried when Cora never came home. She put in a missing person, and a call came through not long ago from H Division. Not much doubt it's the same person. Description, clothes, everything fits. I guess you'd want to talk to her straight away. She's at number 22 Catchcoach Street.
Where's that? Jury asked, as he made a note of the address.
Wait a tick. Yes, here it is. Well, Wembley Knots. Coincidence, that. That's where the O'Brien girl got coshed on the head.
When Jury dropped the receiver back into the cradle, Sergeant Wiggins was studying the photograph of Katie O'Brien.
Pretty girl.
Yes. Leave a note for Mary O'Brien, will you? That we'll be back later this evening. Tell her to tell Mr. Plant. I can't think why he's not here yet.
Where are we going then, sir?
London. Melrose Plant would have been at the Bold Blue Boy in Littlebourne had he not been delayed by Sylvia Bodenheim's gloved hand pointing her garden shears at his lapel.
This is not public property, young man. You are trespassing.
I don't know about that, but it is a public footpath. With his silver-headed stick, Melrose pointed back along the narrow path.
There's a sign yonder. I parked my car back...
Whatever the sign says, I should certainly think anyone would understand that the footpath runs right across a bit of our property.
Well, then, you oughtn't to have bought a house on a bit of land with public access, should you?
Rookswood is not just a house.
Melrose Plant looked to his left, toward the imposing, if somewhat pretentious facade, where stone birds of some sort topped 2 stunted pillars.
Oh, it's an institution of some sort, then?
Certainly not. It's Sir Miles Bodenheim's estate, the family seat. I am Lady Bodenheim. Who are you?
Melrose Plant. He bowed slightly. I hear you've had rather an awful crime hereabouts. Imagine it plays hell with estate values, doesn't it?
It's nothing to do with Littlebourne, just some stranger.
She was interrupted by the approach of a glistening chestnut horse, on which a young woman was mounted. At first Melrose judged her to be extremely attractive, and indeed she was, if such assessments can be made on the basis of cheekbones, tilted eyes, and a well-shaped mouth. But Melrose found her about as unappealing as any woman he had seen in 42 years. All of the elegance of bone structure was dashed to bits by the petulant, hard-eyed expression.
Who's this, Mummy?
No one,
said her mother, turning to attack the roses with her shears.
That is not precisely accurate,
said Melrose, who introduced himself, again bowing. I have the pleasure of addressing...
Have you just got to the village, or what?
Correct. I'm a stranger to town, but not, I hope, for long. He gave what he imagined to be a roguish smile, leering up at her. Julia Bodenheim dismounted, bringing herself literally, if not figuratively, down to his level.
"What are you here for, then?"
"To view some property." He had decided on this as a reason that would allow him to poke about without anyone's knowing he was a friend of Superintendent Jury. The elder Bodenheim woman offered her judgment on the matter.
"It's that rickety little willowed cottage next the Bold Blue Boy, I suppose. I should think twice about buying it. It's been on the market for nearly a year, even though simply everyone's coming to Littlebourne and snapping up cottages."
"That isn't the place I'm interested in, actually." He turned his face toward the Horndean Road. Driving along it in the Rolls, he had discovered the sort of thing he might be interested in. More formidable than Rookswood, its high iron gate had borne a discreet for sale sign. "Stonington. That's the property I'd like to view."
"Stonington? Oh, totally unsuitable for you. It's so big. A bachelor? You are a bachelor."
"But I find it eminently suitable. Not quite so large as I'm used to. And Aunt Agatha will miss her rookery and the groves of ornamental trees. And the swans. Servants' quarters perhaps a bit small. Stables not quite adequate for my hunters. And my sister, Madeline, needs her separate wing. She's a bit offish, you know." That could mean anything, from being in a family way to simple insanity. "Oh, well, chap can't have everything, can he? It's a jolly old place, isn't it?" It was quite clear to him from their expressions that Stonington was a good deal jollier than Rookswood. But whatever they were about to say on the subject was cut off by Melrose calling happily, "And who's this coming along now?" Miles Bodenheim was stumping across the lawn. "Sylvia! Julia!" Instead of calling an answer, Sylvia said to Melrose,
"No, you cannot be serious. Lady Kennington has not kept the place up. You don't want to live at Stonington."
"Plant. Melrose Plant," he said to the latest addition to their number.
"Mr. Plant was thinking of buying Stonington, Miles, when we told him how unsuitable it would be."
"Stonington? Good God, man. You wouldn't want to live there, big as a barn and cold."
"I told him not to buy,"
said Sylvia, closing the matter for all time.
"Mr. Plant hunts,"
said Julia.
"Well, you mentioned hunters. You were talking about stables."
Melrose had to be careful here. He knew nothing about hunting, and found it a perfectly awful sport. "I hunt, yes, but only in Ireland, with the black and tans." Then he wondered if that were hounds, or some defunct segment of the IRA. "Well, this has been most pleasant, but if you'll excuse me—" Melrose touched his cap with his stick, and went whistling down the public footpath, hoping he'd find someone in Littlebourne besides Jury, more amiable than this lot. Amiable was not precisely the word he would have used to describe the next person he passed, standing hard in the middle of the green, carefully noting his progress across it. The little girl wore a giant frown. It made Melrose slightly uncomfortable to think he had called up such a look of affliction on the face of one so small. The Bold Blue Boy was empty at near 4 in the afternoon. Although it was not yet opening time, the door to the saloon bar was open. He went in that way and sat down at one of the tables to wait for the proprietor, who must know Superintendent Jury's whereabouts, and began to make himself at home. He always carried a book with him, Rimbaud usually, but lately mystery stories had begun to supplant the French poets, and now he drew from his coat pocket his latest acquisition for emergency waiting periods, The Affair of the Third Feather. As he settled down to read, he heard a popping noise that made his skin prickle. He turned. The little girl was standing in the doorway, entertaining herself by sucking in her cheeks, bunching up her mouth, and making small, popping noises.
"Mary's over to the shops,"
she said. "Mary?"
"Mary O'Brien. She runs the Blue Boy."
"Well, I shall just have to wait, I dare say."
"Want something, then? There's Bass and Bitter and Abbott's."
She touched all the enamelled beer pools. "I really don't think you should be doing that."
"I do it all the time."
"Very well, then. I'll have a Coburn's Dry."
"That'll be 75p, please,"
she said, setting it before him. 75? Dear heavens, inflation has hit Littlebourne.
"Want some crisps?"
"No, thank you." He put £1 on the table. She stood there, sucking in her cheeks again, making the popping sounds. "Don't do that. You'll ruin the alignment of your jaw and throw off your bite. Your teeth will fall out too."
"Well, they did do anyway."
She pulled back her upper lip and displayed 2 gaps. "I told you."
"Sure you don't want any crisps? Bovril's good."
"I don't like crisps. But if we must..." Melrose fished in his pocket for more change. She climbed up on a bar stool and unhooked a packet of crisps from a circular rack. Tearing open the packet, she frowningly ate them.
"Want one?"
"No. Have you a police station in this village?"
"Across the green."
She was sitting on the window seat and hitched her thumb toward the window at her back, sliding down lower in the seat.
"Are you part of the police?"
"No, of course not."
"There's one here from Scotland Yard."
"Do you happen to know where he is?" It was rather nerve-wracking, this way she had of beating her heels against the window seat.
"Back in London. He had to leave. I suppose he came here for the murder."
She had finished the crisps already and was now folding the greasy little packet into small squares.
"Want some more crisps?"
"I didn't want those. What about this murder?" She shrugged. Now the heels were drumming more quickly against the wood. Melrose plunked another 50p on the table. "Let's have some more crisps." She was up, over and back in a flash with another packet.
"It was horrid, the murder. They cut off her fingers."
"This policeman from Scotland Yard, have you seen him?"
"No."
She had slid practically all the way under the table, and all he could see was the crown of yellow hair and the arm with another empty crisp bag.
"I'm thirsty. It must be all the salt."
"What would you like, a Guinness?"
"Lemon squash."
More money changed hands. She did a little sidestep dance to the bar, and then started clanging bottles and glasses.
"I might have seen him," she said,
when she had sidestepped danced back to the table.
"They're staying here, I think, him and the other detective."
They could have lived here for days, Melrose thought, eating crisps and drinking Coburn's very dry and lemon squash without anyone's knowing.
"Maybe he'll be able to find out who wrote those letters."
She was opening up the window seat, rooting for something inside. "What letters?"
"Nasty letters."
Settling down at the table again with a colouring book and a box of Crayolas, she said,
"They were all in colours."
She opened up her book to what appeared to be a woodland scene and began to colour a deer blue. "In colour? That's awfully strange." She nodded, filling in the one deer and going on to the next blue deer. He felt vaguely irritated with this flying in the face of convention. "And you don't know anything else about them?"
"What?"
"The letters." She shook her head. Having finished with the 2 deer, she took a red crayon and drew a thick and crooked line across the forest floor. She looked at it, then held it up for Melrose's inspection.
"Does that look like a river?"
"No, it's red."
"It could be a river of blood, couldn't it?"
"Blood? What a dreadful thought. What put that into your mind?"
"They said the water was all bloody where they found her. Do you know any secrets?"
"Secrets? Well, yes, I suppose so."
"Would you tell them?"
Oh dear, a moral dilemma. He'd have to tread carefully. "Depends, I suppose. If it would do someone a harm to keep it, I'd tell." She frowned. Wrong answer. Suddenly she was up and tossing book and Crayolas back into the window seat.
"I've got to go now, but I could show you round the village if you like."
Well, so much for secrets. Then he remembered why he was supposed to be here. "Have you an estate agent here?"
"Someone that sells houses?"
"Yes, there's Mr. Mainwaring. I can show you where his office is. It's just along the high, next to the sweet shop." As she marched him through the saloon bar, he said, "I suppose this Mrs. O'Brien does meals?"
"Yes, she made tea today for the policeman. Oxtail soup."
"You certainly do keep abreast of the goings-on."
"They're coming back tonight, I heard Mary say." "You must be his friend."
Melrose stopped at the door and stared. Would none of his ruses work on her?
"Well, not exactly. I just happen to have heard he..."
but she was already doing her sidestep dance down the pavement. Melrose called out to her, "Just you mind, we're going to the estate agent." But it did no good, as she'd already danced her way through the door of the bow-fronted shop, carrying the legend, "Conkles, Sweets and Tobaccos." "And you're wrong," said Melrose from the doorway of Conkles, "if you think you're going to stick me up for sweets." No, she wasn't. Freddie Mainwaring sat comfortably slouched in his leather swivel chair, appearing to regard it as a grand joke that he, of all people, should be caught selling real estate. His smooth manner had changed when Melrose mentioned just what piece of real estate he was interested in. Now Plant was about to work the conversation around to the subject of murder, when the door was quite literally flung open, and two women entered. "Ah, there you are, Freddie. Oh, you're busy. I just wanted to give you this and make sure you were coming out Monday week." From the bunch in her arms, the woman extracted a paper and put it on Mainwaring's desk. Melrose saw it was some kind of diagram of coloured lines. "You and Miles are to follow the yellow route. We meet at 5, and I want everybody there spot on." The woman was tiresomely hearty, voice booming from inexhaustible lungs. The same charge could not be made of her companion, who, sunk in timorousness, plied the end of her belt, as if she might suddenly hang herself with it. "What makes you think the police won't have the whole wood cordoned off, Ernestine?" asked Mainwaring.
"Don't be so tiresome, Freddie. The speckled crackle won't wait round forever, murder or no murder. Spot on 5, then. She'll be a bang-up morning, if we all keep to our roots."
She waved the papers in Melrose's face.
"It's not often one has the opportunity of taking on a great speckled crackle."
"It certainly isn't," said Melrose, removing his spectacles and polishing them with his pocket handkerchief. "I've seen it only once, myself."
"But you couldn't have done. Where do you think you saw it?"
Melrose could not have been profligate with news of the bird had he wanted to. Salcombe."
"Salcombe? That's impossible."
Mainwaring interceded with introductions. Mr. Plant was made known to the Misses Craigie, Ernestine, and Augusta. He inclined his head politely as he rose to take the hand Ernestine had shot out like a spanner. It pumped Melrose's own.
"Are you staying here? Visiting? You must join us. You could go the green route."
She consulted her paper.
"Here we are. You'd be with Sylvia and Augusta. Lucky for you, they're seasoned bird-watchers."
Sylvia Bodenheim at 5 a.m. Serve him right. Ernestine handed Melrose a copy of her map.
"Have one in case you're here. We'd soon put you in the picture. Goodbye, Freddie."
They departed in a swirl of papers. Melrose turned to look out of the window and saw a dark-haired woman pass by, wave in at Mainwaring, pause as if deciding whether to enter, and then turn away. She appeared to be studying the tree outside the door. "I must be going," said Melrose.
"You'll be in touch?"
"Oh, certainly. Stonington sounds just the ticket." But as he walked out of the door, he was not thinking of Stonington. He was thinking that Littlebourne was full of naturalists. The dark-haired woman was still inspecting the fruit tree. "Are you blue, red, green, or yellow?" Melrose asked, thinking this rather a clever introduction to a conversation. He was totally unprepared for her deep blush and indrawn breath.
"You mean Augusta's telling perfect strangers? She is round a twist."
"Augusta?"
"No, the other Miss Craigie." "Ernestine? She didn't get one."
"One what?"
"Letter. Isn't that what you're talking about?"
Then Melrose remembered. The child had said anonymous letters had been written in colours.
"Good heavens, no! I was talking about the birdwatcher's map."
Melrose shoved it toward her face, like a proof of identity.
"Oh! Oh!"
As she almost smiled before she blushed again, he took the opportunity to invite her to tea. He hoped the Bodenheims were not dismantling his roles. Once settled in the magic muffin, at a wobbly table with a view of the High, they introduced themselves. Then Polly Praed said, "Why were you talking to Freddie Mainwaring? Are you thinking of property or something?"
I'm interested in Stonington."
Muffins and tea were set before them. Polly buttered a muffin half. I'm a mystery writer." She shoved her plate and cup aside and leaned towards him. "And I can tell you're not here to buy Stonington. You'd have to have packets of money. Though it would be nice if you were to buy it. That would kill the Bodenheims, to have someone else in the area taking over the #1 spot. The only worst thing for them would be to have someone titled moved in." "You're not, are you?" "Well, you are. Say you are." Her face was shoved closer to his in her enthrallment. The proximity was not displeasing. "I'm not." The face moved back, and he almost felt he had betrayed her. "But I used to be." "Used to be? Whatever do you mean?" "The Earl of Cavaness, and 12th Viscount Ardry, etc. But now I'm plain Melrose Plant." What he was now did not seem to interest her in the least. "How did you lose all that?" "Oh, I gave them up." "Why?" "Oh, I see. You had gambling debts, or did something awful, and didn't want to heap disgrace on the family name." Her eyes sparkled, now that she had forged out a history for him. In another moment she'd have him inside an iron mask. "Unfortunately, nothing so romantic as all that." He wondered what tempted him to justify his action to her. He found her unsettling, though he couldn't understand why, violet eyes or not. There was nothing at all wonderful about the rest of her, sitting there dressed in that unbecoming shade of brown. "I didn't want them any more, I suppose." "Oh, well, even without the title, Julia Bodenheim will be prancing herself up and down on horseback before you. You'd best clear off. You're the perfect catch." "Well, I'm glad you think so." "I didn't say I thought so." Number 22 Catchcoach Street was distinguished from the run-down houses on either side only by virtue of its fresher trim, tidier yard. Nell Beavers, the slum landlady of the street, she had told them proudly that she owned this and both houses on either side, was adding to their store of information on Cora Binns. She had left the house on the Thursday evening, sometime around 6. "I think it was 6. I don't keep tabs, do I?" Jury bet. Cora Binns had the upstairs flat, and Jury was sure the landlady knew every creak in the floorboards. "A bit late for a job interview, wasn't it?" asked Wiggins. "I wouldn't know, would I? She told me the agency," Cora was a temp sec, "rang her up and said someone in Hartfield needed a steno. All you have to do is check with the agency. It's called the Smart Girls Secretarial Service in King's Cross. I'd just hop right round there if I was you." "Which underground station did Cora use?" "Same as we all do. Wembley Knots." Cora complained a lot about the tube. "Shocking how much it's gone up. Just from Wembley Knots, it's 80p to King's Cross. But they keep building more, don't they?" "You told Inspector Carstairs. She said she was coming back that same night." "That's right. That's what Cora said. Now, if I was you, I'd ask the Cripses next door. Though why Cora'd want to hang about with her beats me. It's disgraceful, it is. Landlords ain't got no rights in this country, just tenants. God knows I've been trying to get rid of them for years. Ash the Flash running around getting up to Lord knows what." Primly, she folded her hands in her aproned lap. "I ain't no stranger to police, believe me. Seen enough of them come round about Ash Cripps. Beavers, my late husband, God rest him, always did say that sort of a pervert had a problem." And then, to Jury's and Wiggins' infinite surprise, she opened her old blue cardigan and quickly closed it again. "You know what I mean. Been in most of the parks and lavatories in the East End. Probably no stranger to the West, I'd say." Outside number 24, a ring of grubby children were holding hands and skipping round a battered pram. They were all coatless, despite the September evening, and one of them was completely stark, except for its vest. "Your mum home?" asked Jury, after checking to make sure the baby wasn't smothered or otherwise dead. Without a break, the children brought forth fresh peals of laughter, and also the opening of the door. "Shut your mouths and get your knickers on. What you want?" The last of this was directed at Jury and Wiggins. A rat-faced dog saw its chance to escape and sprinted through the crack in the door. Through that opening, Jury saw half a face and half a figure, and doubted the other half would be any improvement over the oily hair, metallic eye, and pendulous breast. When she opened the door wider, the extraordinary girth completely filled it. The whole figure sported a cotton frock, straining at its buttons. "Police officers," said Jury, showing his ID.
"Come about Ashley? Well, no wonder. Come on in."
Before he could correct her misapprehension, she was shouting at the ring of children to come on in and get their mash.
"So what's Ashley been getting up to? Showing himself to the ladies again? Stop that!"
She yelled to the goblin ring, climbing all over the pram and nearly upsetting it.
"And come and get your tea."
2 of them had stuffed themselves into the pram with the baby, while the others shook it violently. At the mention of food, they nearly toppled the carriage, and Wiggins with it, in their rush for their tea.
"Shut your filthy mouths and get your knickers on, Joey."
She smacked the child's bald bottom as he darted between Wiggins and Jury.
"Back here."
She motioned Jury and Wiggins along like a tour guide. Back here was the dirtiest scullery Jury had ever seen. Crusted dishes, spent crockery, and pock-marked pots covered every surface. Sergeant Wiggins stared with perverse fascination at a frying pan which held an inch of hardened lard. Seemingly oblivious to it all, she spooned out mashed potatoes into the urchin's several bowls. Her cigarette dribbled grey ash over the pot.
"Well, I told him, didn't I? Brings in his little bit of a stray for all the world to see."
She was accustomed, it seemed, to dealing with police, having even achieved a certain rapport with them. Jury smiled his thanks as he refused the proffered pot of mash. Wiggins took a step backward.
"Right under me own nose and banging her."
She pointed to some nether region at the rear of the house.
"And I'm not putting up with that, am I? Got my pride, ain't I?"
She circled the table and dropped another dollop of potatoes in each bowl.
"There, and that's gone, so shut your mouths and keep your dirty hands off Suki's bowl."
Smartly, she slapped a hand which had skulked towards its brother's mash with a spoon. She surveyed the ring of grimy faces.
"Where's Friendly?" "Over at schoolyard, Mum. Said he was going to show it to Fiona." "I'll show it him, don't think I won't. Just like his daddy's Friendly is."
Wiggins was studying the graffiti-covered and faded wallpaper, where huge stalks of gladioli had been transformed into phalluses. Following this, he retreated with his notebook to the kitchen doorway. Jury attempted to change the subject. "Mrs. Beavers said you're a friend of Cora Binns, Mrs. Cripps."
"Cora? Oh, yeah, I know Cora. What's this in aid of? Ashley been at Cora again?"
"Cora Binns has been murdered."
"Well, I never."
"Can you think of anyone who might have wanted her out of the way? Or boyfriends, perhaps? Jealousy's a pretty common motive." She could think of no one. Jury took a picture of Katie O'Brien from his pocket. "Ever seen this girl, Mrs. Cripps?"
"Pretty little thing. No, I never seen her. What's she got to do with Cora, then?"
"I don't know she has. She was taking violin lessons in Drum Street from someone called Cyril McHenry. You wouldn't know him, would you?"
"The fiddler? Oh, sure, we all know Cyril. Lives 2 streets over. Well, what you want to do is go along to the pub at the end of the street there. That's where they all hang out. Ashley, too. Right run-down old place it be. You'll see it next to the sweet shop."
Wiggins, who was trying to detach the fingers of the little girl who had his trouser leg in a vice-like grip, looked as if even a run-down pub would be sanctuary compared with the Cripps's kitchen.
"If you see Ashley, tell him he's wanted here. Bloody fool sits round that pub all day. He won't be much help, I can tell you. Can't even see straight once he's got an habits in him."
"OK, thanks for your time. I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't mention this to anyone, Mrs. Cripps."
"Why, Telly's what they call me."
She lay a finger against her mouth.
"Me lips is sealed."
As Wiggins and Jury walked up Catchcoach Street toward the pub, the sergeant shuddered.
"Did you see that skillet, sir? There was tiny footprints in the grease."
The sign of the Anodyne Necklace creaked in the rain blowing down the dingy street. Its scabrous paint had once been green, but most of the colour and detail were now washed out, so that Jury could just barely make out the shape of the crude strand of beads which must have given the pub its name. "I think it means cure," said Jury, to Wiggins' muffled question about the name. No one looked more in need of one than Wiggins. His shoulders were hunched inward against the rain as he sneezed into his handkerchief. The publican cast a bored eye on Jury's warrant card.
"It's Ash again, innit?"
He nodded in the direction of a table where a group of some 5 or 6 men, apparently lorded over by a fat man with pince-nez, seemed intent on some sort of game. The one Jury decided must be Ash Cripps had a wide, dented face, as if a car had backed into it. He rolled his cigar in his mouth and looked down at a piece of graph paper. They all had sheets of paper. The table was awash in paper. "Not him. It's about Cora Binns. Your name?" "Harry Biggins." "Cora, is it? She never seemed to do no harm." "No, but someone's done her some. She's been murdered. What do you know about her?"
"Cora? Well, I'll be—"
Having just named her, Biggins now denied any personal knowledge at all of Cora Binns. Jury showed him the picture of Katie O'Brien. He could not tell from Biggins' expression whether he was lying or not when he denied even more fervently any knowledge of the O'Brien girl. "She had a music teacher who I was told comes in here, McHenry. Now please don't tell me you don't know him, or I'll have to wonder how you stay in business, Mr. Biggins, given the few people you seem to know."
"Never said I didn't know him, did I now? That's him over there at Duck Chamberlain's table. That ain't his real name, Chamberlain. He just uses it for the game. Cyril's the one with the beard."
"What game?"
"Wizards and Warlords, it's called. Stupid game as far as I'm concerned. But there ain't no accounting for tastes, is there?"
"It's about Katie, isn't it?" asked Cyril McHenry, when he and Jury were seated at a table out of earshot. "I told the other cop everything I knew. How many times do I have to answer the same questions?" "As many times as we ask, I suppose. The other man was from H Division, Mr. McHenry. I'm with Scotland Yard." McHenry seemed extremely wary, and looked now very young and very nervous. Probably he was older than he looked, but the jeans and turtleneck and extreme blue of his eyes would have put him in his late 20s if one hadn't noticed the small lines of age. His hair and beard were fawn-coloured and neatly trimmed. "There was the matter of her clothes, Mr. McHenry. You didn't know she was raising the money for them by playing her violin in tube stations?"
"No."
"Look, I really didn't. I'd never have let her do it." "She must have been changing, for one thing, to make some impression on you, Mr. McHenry. Thought maybe it made her look more grown up." The young man said nothing. On his face was a look of abject misery. "Is she in love with you?"
"In love? She's only 16, Superintendent."
"I never knew that to stop anyone."
"Do you know Cora Binns?" "Cora Binns? Yeah, I know her. But only about as well as I know you. Not my type."
"She's been murdered. You wouldn't have any ideas about that, would you?"
"My God! Where? When?"
"In Littlebourne, where Katie comes from. Apparently, you know them both."
"Lucky me."
"Did they know one another?"
"Well, how the hell should I know?"
"Well, did Katie come in here?"
"Okay, once or twice she did."
"Bit young for that, isn't she?"
"Oh, for Christ's sakes, we weren't standing our drinks. She just liked to watch the game."
"Well, did she play?"
"No, Luke, she was only in for a bit, honestly."
"Did she talk to anyone else in here, other than you?"
"No. And I can't see how I should have known Cora Binns. I can't remember her being in here at the same time."
Jury looked over to the table, from which the other players had apparently drifted off, their play rudely interrupted. Only the fat man, Chamberlain, sat there. "It's a strange game."
"Wizards. Passes the time. We've got a kind of club here. Play several times a week. Look, I've got a lesson on in 5 minutes. Are you finished with me?"
"You can go. I'll want to talk with you later." Jury watched Cyril McHenry walk towards the door and thought that if he didn't know what Katie O'Brien's feelings were, he was pretty certain about McHenry's. Doc Chamberlain sat like a stout idol, hands folded over vest, pince-nez dangling on a thin black ribbon.
"I call myself that," he said in answer to Jury's question, "merely for fun. You understand? Have you heard of the famous Dr. Chamberlain? Few have, beyond the portals of the Anodyne Necklace. Dr. Chamberlain swore that a simple necklace of bone, the one represented on the sign above the door out there, that such a necklace as he'd made would cure anything from a child's teething pains to gout. You've probably not heard of our game, either. Wizards and warlords. There's a treasure, you see. We've been looking for it for months. On paper only, of course."
Chamberlain held up the big sheet of graph paper. It was a diagram of several views of an enormous castle, drawn with exceeding care and elaborate detail. When Jury reached for it, Dr. Chamberlain pulled the paper back.
"You won't tell the others, will you? The map is supposed to be seen only by the wizard master." "I'd die first," said Jury.
White Ellie greeted Jury cheerily, as if he was one of the family.
"I told him you'd be back for him, but I didn't tell him nothing else. Serve him right to get in a muck sweat the way he goes on."
"Shut up, elephant, and give me thanks."
From the cooker's top, she chucked a packet of cigarettes toward the table, ketchup smeared and still ringed with empty bowls from the kiddies' tea.
"So, what you want?"
asked Ash Cripps.
"Listen, if it's about that little bit of mystery says I'll give her one behind the necklace, it's a fucking lie."
"It's not about that, Ash," said Jury.
"Then it's them Screeber gang. I ain't had nothing to do with that bunch, nor no firm since last July, and I did me time, so don't be coming in here."
"Nothing to do with the firm, Ash." Ash squinted up at him, confused. If it wasn't sex, and it wasn't small-time theft, what could it be? "Ash, it's about Cora Binns. I was telling your wife here that Cora's been murdered."
"Cora? That little blonde with the big—"
He held his hands in front of his chest, apparently unable to let any unexpected event go by without attaching a sexual meaning to it.
"Interfered with, was she?"
"No. What we want is information about her friends, boyfriends to be more exact. Anyone with any quarrel against Cora Binns. Know of anyone?" White Ellie slid a greasy mess out onto a plate.
"Had her eye on Dick. I know that."
"Dick? What Dick?"
said her husband.
"You know Dick. Don't you remember he was staying here that night and we was in bed and he come along and give me one?"
"Oh, yeah, that Dick. Friend of Trev's, he was. Now there was a lad. Best wizard master we ever did have. Though don't let the doc hear me say it. Matter of fact, Trev and Cora might have had something going for a bit."
White Ellie snorted, wiping another plate with the sleeve of her dress.
"Trevor, he was one for the ladies. Pity what happened to him."
Jury looked from the one to the other. "Trevor?"
"Yeah, Trevor Tree. Good lad was Trevor."
"Ash, how well did you know Trevor Tree?"
"Trevor lived back in Drum Street, same street Cyril lives in. Smart lad. Nicked $250,000 in jewellery, and then the poor blighter gets run down by a car. Wages of sin. Trevor was a real artist. You should have seen some of the maps he did for the game. Finicky he was about detail."
"Oh, shut up, Ashley. The super ain't interested in some stupid game of that wizards. So let me borrow your strides. I've got to go to the laundrette."
"You don't need me trousers, woman. I'm sick of you using me trousers."
"I do need 'em. So when's I sit down, they don't look at me legs."
Jury rose to leave, apparently to the undying gratitude of Sergeant Wiggins, whose life was now being made hell not only by the girl, but by the rat-faced dog who'd got a grip on his heel. "I'll see you later, Ash. Don't leave town, will you?"
"That's a prayer. If I could do, I'd have done it long ago."
As they walked through the door, the dog slithered between their legs and waited at the end of the walk. Wiggins gave it an evil look and said,
"What do you think, sir? That's very odd about this tree fellow living round here."
"Yes. Let's leave the car and walk, Wiggins. I want to see the inside of that underground stop where Katie was attacked." As Jury walked down the pavement, he was amazed to hear his sergeant, whose mouth was as pristine pure as his sinuses, saying with a kick thrown in to dramatize his feelings about the dog,
"Fuck off, Toto. We're not in Kansas."
They stood in the Wembley Knots tube station, where, according to Carstairs' diagram, Katie O'Brien had been attacked. Jury was staring absently at the Evita poster. Diamond points of light sparked her necklace, rings, bracelet, hair, even the microphones bristling around her. It was then that he recalled Ernestine Craigie's remark, the one he had been trying to think of since he left the cottage. Bedizened, beringed, and bejewelled. Evita certainly was that. "What a mug," said Jury to himself. "Why didn't I see it before?" "Wiggins, get over to this smart girls agency and dig out the manager. Find out about this interview Cora Binns had and call me." Cora Binns? Freddie Mainwaring looked extremely puzzled that Scotland Yard should put the question to him. "The woman in the Horndean Wood, Mr. Mainwaring," said Jury. "Was that her name? No, I didn't know any Cora Binns. A couple of months ago you engaged the services of Cora Binns as a shorthand typist. 2 weeks ago you called the Smart Girls Secretarial Service in King's Cross and asked for a typist to go to Stonington. I think I'll have a drink." As Mainwaring unstoppered the whisky decanter, Jury said, "You didn't recognize her from the picture Inspector Carstairs showed you?" "No, of course I didn't, or I'd have said so, wouldn't I? For God's sakes, I only must have used her the one time. They all look alike anyway, don't they? She wasn't important." "She was to someone." "All right. So I rang up that agency. The Smart Girls Secretarial Service? Silly bloody name. I rang them up and made the arrangements. It was merely a favour to Lady Kennington." "What time did you tell Cora Binns to appear for the appointment?" "Look, I didn't tell this Binns person anything. I talked to some woman at the agency. Wait a minute. They asked me who I'd had in the past, and I said I couldn't remember the name. There you are, Superintendent. Just you contact their agency and talk to whoever it was took the call. That should certainly prove this was nothing more than coincidence." "We have done. The girl's on holiday at the moment." "Well, why in hell would this Binns person have been going to Stonington through the Horndean Wood?" "What directions did you give the agency?" "To take the train to Hartfield, and for them to advance her £5 for a cab, and Lady Kennington would make good." "Cora Binns didn't take a cab. She took the Littlebourne Horndean bus. She got off in Littlebourne." "Well, I don't know anything about that, do I?" "Your wife's away, Mr. Mainwaring?" asked Jury, suddenly changing the subject. "Away? Yes. Visiting her mother." "These anonymous letters, you have any ideas about that?" "I told your sergeant no. They're all rubbish, of course." "You'd vouch for the character of each." "I certainly—" What he'd do was interrupted by the rather plummy tones of the door chime, dropping its mellifluous treble into the dark hallway. "Excuse me, will you?" said Mainwaring. It was a woman's voice that came to Jury from the hall, first in normal and then in hushed tones. Ramona Way held out a hand to Jury, which was marble white and marble cold. She was wearing a very short black velvet cape over a white wool dress and a fall of jet beads. With that white skin and black helmet of hair, Jury imagined Ramona Way went in for that black and white ensemble rather often. "I'm glad you stopped by, Miss Way," said Jury. Mainwaring wasn't. That was clear. Ramona Way focused on Jury. "You're here about this murder, I expect." "You didn't know the woman?" "Of course not. I told that inspector from Hartfield everything I did know, which was nothing." "Cora Binns was her name?" Really? You're one of the people who got an anonymous letter? Yes. They were all rubbish, of course. You were seen as having a liaison with both Dr. Ridley and Mr. Mainwaring. Obviously, whoever wrote them wasn't very observant. Mainwaring must have picked up on something to come. Ramona? Oh, don't be silly, darling. Freddie and Stella are divorcing. That's why she's gone to her mother's. We're planning on marrying. Won't stand there looking so ashen, Freddie. It'll have to come out soon. Besides, it does give us an alibi, doesn't it? She smiled archly, looking at Jury. Where were you on Tuesday afternoon, 2 weeks ago? Both Mainwaring and Ramona Way looked at Jury with surprise. She spoke first. Whatever happened then? Jury looked at his hand, the one which had just shaken Melrose Plant's. Why would you cut off the fingers of one hand, Mr. Plant? It was 9:30 in the Bold Blue Boy, as Melrose Plant drew his napkin across his lap. You've only just arrived, have neither inquired about the menu nor Aunt Agatha, and you're already talking about hacked-off fingers. You certainly do get down to cases, don't you, even when you're 2 hours late for dinner. Mrs. O'Brien, who seems kindness itself, in spite of her troubles, has kept the kitchen open. Molly, our waitress, showed no similar inclination until I crossed her palm with silver. I've taken the liberty of ordering. I hope you don't mind. They do steak and chips, mullet and chips, plaice and chips. An elaborate menu, to be sure, but I was assisted in my choice by Molly, who informed me that they were out of mullet and the plaice had gone off. Thus I plumped for the steak. How are you, Superintendent? Congratulations on your long-overdue promotion. I'm sorry I'm so late. I'm sorrier yet about the weekend in North Hants. My DCS heard I was planning a short holiday and immediately erased all the other names from the frame. How is Chief Superintendent Racer? Awful, I hope? He may not be around much longer. There's growing dissatisfaction on the part of the higher-ups. Can't imagine why. Where is Molly with our wine? Melrose craned his neck around at the approach of a heavy-set girl with a thick braid and a tray. Molly, her work-hardened hands apparently impervious to the sizzling platters she carried, set the steaks, along with a bottle of wine, unceremoniously on the table. "Let's not look at the label," said Melrose, pouring wine into their glasses. "Shall I return to the cut-off fingers? Agatha will be crushed not to have been here. I didn't tell her I was coming, of course. When she finds out, she'll cry all over her fairy cakes. Do you think the murdered woman was holding something?" "No. I think she was wearing something incriminating. Something, at least, the murderer didn't want found." Wrestling with the tough steak, Melrose listened attentively, while Jury provided all the essential bits of information surrounding the murder. Finally, he put by his knife and fork and said, "I hope to God you sort all this out before I'm forced to put on my waders and go looking for the beastly speckled crackle." "You've met Miss Ernestine Craigie, obviously." "Yes. I really feel on intimate terms with this bird. I'm sure I could pick it out of a police lineup. Frankly, though, if you think the O'Brien girl might have been attacked because she knew something, there's a little girl who was a good friend of hers who I think is keeping something back from the police." The little girl in question was coming through the doorway of the private bar, all oblivious of Jury and Plant, directly in her line of vision. "Isn't it a bit late for you to be up canvassing the public houses?" Emily Louise turned upon Melrose with an air of abstracted concentration. "Oh, it's you. Surprise, surprise. But since you're here, why don't you sit down for a bit? Superintendent Jury would like a word with you." All unconscious of the formidable gentleman to whom she was being introduced, Emily Louise grudgingly climbed up on a chair beside him, opened her colouring book, and selected a crayon. Melrose could not help inspecting the picture. It was another awful scene, this one a barnyard. She was aiming an orange crayon at a duck. He tried to control his annoyance. "Pleased to meet you, Emily," said Jury. "I understand you're a friend of Katie O'Brien's." She was going at the mother duck with a vengeance, and merely nodded. "Nice to have friends," said Jury. "Too bad when something happens to them." Emily nodded and started colouring the line of ducklings blue to match the mother's feet. Plant stared at it.
Friends sometimes tell us things. I remember when I was a lad, I had this great friend, Jimmy Poole his name was. We were always together. Jimmy Poole and I used to tell one another secrets, and sometimes we'd even stick pins to our fingers and swear on the blood we'd never tell.
Don't talk about blood.
Okay. Now then, Jimmy Poole and I used to go out in the woods and smoke fags and stuff like that, which we weren't supposed to. We did a lot of things we weren't supposed to.
Like what?
She asked, without looking up from her book.
Oh, you know, swimming in water too deep, staying out after dark. We used to put pillows in our beds to make our mums think we were asleep and then crawl out of our windows. Jimmy Poole was really clever when it came to finding places where no one could find us. He left false trails. There was a cave where we liked to go and where we hid stuff we didn't want our mums finding. I remember once I stole a comic from a newsagent's.
He watched as both Emily Louise and Melrose looked at him in mild astonishment.
Oh, yes, I did things like that. Honesty came to me late in life, I expect.
She was looking at him now, hard.
I wish I had a lemon squash.
I'm sure Mr. Plant will be happy to fetch one. I might miss an instalment.
Sighing, he got up.
Go on, then,
said Emily Louise, prodding Jury's arm.
Well, Jimmy Poole told me lots of strange things and made me swear I'd never breathe a word to anyone.
But then something happened to someone in the village. Emily Louise had clasped her hands over the top of her head, as if she meant to push herself under the table.
This one person had an accident.
A bad one?
Pretty bad. She fell downstairs. That is, maybe she fell. Some people thought she might have got pushed downstairs. We were never sure, though, who did it.
Well, didn't the police come?
Not the yard, no. Of course, they might have done. If only Jimmy Poole had told what he knew.
There was a deep silence on the part of Emily, a silence interrupted only by Melrose's rattling 3 glasses onto the table. 1 lemon squash and 2 brandies. Emily took a sip of her drink.
But he didn't tell.
No, but I did.
You? But it was a secret.
I know. Believe me, I thought about it and thought about it. See, the trouble was, Jimmy Poole was sick, and I couldn't ask him if it was okay to tell.
What was wrong with him?
Mumps. He couldn't talk. His throat was so bad.
Did he die?
No. But you see, as long as he couldn't talk, I couldn't get him to agree to letting me tell the secret. I had to decide for myself, and that's what always makes it hard. Deciding for yourself. You know why I finally did?
Emily shook the head beneath the clasped hands, but kept her eyes riveted on Jury.
Because I was afraid that someone else might get pushed downstairs, or maybe even the one they pushed might get pushed again.
Who did you tell?
The rector. He seemed the right sort of person.
Well, why didn't you tell the constable, then? Didn't your village have one?
Yes, only I was afraid of police.
I'm not.
You're not, I know.
She rolled her blue crayon back and forth.
Was Jimmy Poole mad at you?
No, he was glad. He said he'd have told himself, finally, only he couldn't talk.
Emily Louise blew out her cheeks, then poked them with her fingers, 1 on each side.
Did Jimmy Poole ever give you anything?
Yes.
Did he tell you not to give it to anyone else?
Yes.
Was it before he got sick?
Yes.
What was it?
A tin box.
What was in the box?
Money. Some letters. Some jewellery. A strange message.
What sort of message?
I never figured it out. Suddenly Emily jumped up, gathered her crayons and book together.
I've got to go now.
As she disappeared through the doorway, Melrose said, "That was absolutely fascinating." "Keep an eye on her, will you?" said Jury. "You were right, I'm sure. She knows something."
Well, she's not going to tell me. Anyway, she's to do the Phaeton rides tomorrow. There's a church fete scheduled, you didn't know?
No. The first thing tomorrow I have to talk with this Lady Kennington. And right now I think I'll have a kip. Christ, I'm tired.
It's all that mucking about with Jimmy Poole.
I seem to remember that you told me you were born and bred in London.
There never was that village, was there? There never was a Jimmy Poole.
Oh, there's always a Jimmy Poole. Jury drank off his brandy and said good night. Melrose wasn't sure what had woken him at first light, but as he hadn't been able to sleep again, perhaps sharing Jury's unease regarding Emily, he'd got dressed and fiddled around for a bit over a pot of tea, and finally made for Rookswood. He knew she would be there, grooming the horses in preparation for her carriage rides for the church fete. The voice was definitely hers, and it was now yelling,
"Give it back! Give it!"
The rather unpleasant laugh, in answer to this demand, was male. As Melrose rounded the stables, he glimpsed the white sweater sleeve of Derek Bodenheim, raised on high and holding a book. Neither Derek nor Emily saw Melrose. They were too engaged in their game of grabs, although it didn't appear to be a game to Emily. Melrose stepped forward, raised his silver-knobbed stick, and brought it down smartly, catching Derek just in the crook of the arm.
"Really, old chap, she asked you nicely now, didn't she?"
Derek rubbed his arm and glared at Melrose.
"What the bloody hell?"
Emily moved swiftly to collect her book.
"Why don't you just run along, there's a good lad." "Run along? Who the hell do you think you're talking to?"
Derek, furious, called back to Emily as he crunched across the gravel of the stable yard.
"I'll tell your mother. See if I don't. You've been reading dirty books."
Emily looked from the silver-knobbed stick to Melrose.
"Did you ever kill anyone?"
"Only in the Foreign Legion. What the devil was all that about?" Holding the book firmly under her arm, she went about retrieving her pitchfork.
"All boys are horrid."
"Oh, I don't know. They could be rather fun. After all, they grow up to be people like me." Her eyes appeared over the stable door to regard him with distaste.
"What was the book Derek was trying to get away from you? And why do you call it dirty?" "Because it's about men and women."
"That takes care of 99% of the world's literature. Anyway, why do you want to read it?"
"I'm not reading it. I'm giving it to the Scotland Yard person."
As if, he thought, the name Jury went engraved permanently on her heart.
"Superintendent Jury said he was going to Stonington. When you've finished with the horses, why don't we go along to the Blue Boy with your book? I'm sure, though it's barely 9, there's always a lemon squash about."
Two could play at this game, though he suddenly realized he was playing it wrong. He'd have to get the book before she held him up for drinks and crisps.
"As a matter of fact, I think you ought to give it to me now, and then we'll go along to the Blue Boy." "Oh, all right."
She stomped over and dropped the book in his lap. It was, he realized, a burden she was only too happy to palm off on somebody else.
"It's Katie's."
"Katie O'Brien's book? What's all the secrecy about?"
"I don't know. She told me to get it out of her room in case anything happened."
Was she expecting something to happen? Emily shrugged and looked over his shoulder at the book. It was covered with a piece of white graph paper on which the word geometry had been printed, angling down the front. He removed the cover and saw it was a standard neo-Gothic bosom ripper, titled Love's Wanton Ways.
Was she hiding this from her mother? "It's not the book, it's the cover."
She took it from him, unfolded the homemade cover, and held it up.
"See? It's a kind of map."
It was a very strange sort of map, meticulously drawn in pencil and ink, bearing the legend, The Forest of Horndean. Thick woodland surrounded a central picture consisting of small figures, a castle down in the right-hand corner, and numerous trails and roads. There were bears' tracks, a footpath, a grotto, a trail left by a giant snail, and a replica of the Anodyne Necklace. All of these were partially enclosed by a moat and a yellow brick road. The church of St. Pancras sat above a small bridge, and running right through the centre of everything was the river of blood. The woman who ran out of the front door of Stonington just as Jury stopped his car in the circular drive was carrying something wrapped up in a blanket. As he crunched up the gravel toward her, she called to him, "Would you please go with me to the vet's? I can't drive and carry the cat, too." Drooping out of one end of the blanket was a black, wedge-shaped face, a tiny ribbon of blood matting the fur between nose and mouth. "Certainly, only let's use my car. You hold the cat and I'll drive. What's the matter with it?" "I think it was hit by a car, but I don't know." She looked out of her window, rather than at Jury, as she said this, cutting off conversation. He knew Lady Kennington had few servants, just a gardener and a cook. This was certainly neither, so it must be the lady herself. He could not see her face now, only a square of paisley lawn tied at the base of her neck, holding back her oak-coloured hair. But what he had seen he thought to be a fine face, pale, green-eyed, intelligent. "Is that your favourite cat?" What a stupid question. He cursed himself as he negotiated a sharp curve. "No, it's just an old cat that wandered onto the grounds one day. I don't even like this cat." "Of course." Quickly she looked at him, and just as quickly looked back through her window. "Oh, just shut up and drive." They had, on the ride back, introduced themselves. She did not seem unduly concerned about his position. Once inside the house, it was very cold in the enormous entry room, she hung his coat with some care, shaking beads of water from it. "I should have lit a fire," she said, looking at the cold hearth. "But it's not so bad once you're out of the hall." She led Jury into a much smaller room with a French window at one end. Here a fire had been lit. The room was bare, except for some packing cases in one corner and a chintz-covered chair draped with a shawl. Beside the chair, sitting on the floor, was a teacup. "I was sitting in here when I saw the cat running up the drive." She gestured toward the window. Jury was looking at the blank places on the walls where pictures had clearly hung. "I just had Sotheby's in to take the furniture, except for the chair, which they didn't want. You've come about that Binns woman they found in the wood, haven't you?" Jury nodded, and she looked at him mutely before she turned away, as if trying to divine the answer to a difficult puzzle set for her. "I suppose you think it's pretty odd getting into that state about a cat after there's been a murder. I really didn't connect you with the police. I'm sorry." "No need to apologize. And no, I don't think it was odd. About the cat, I mean." Jury felt it had all happened, that ride to the vet's, a year ago, rather than only 15 minutes. "Lady Kennington, I'd really like to get some information about the theft of that emerald necklace a year ago." "What's that got to do with it?" "Trevor Tree, you remember, was run down by a car after he was released by the police. That necklace has never turned up, and it must be somewhere." Her hand went to her throat, as if the mention of it had triggered some tactile response. "What happened that night, Lady Kennington?" She looked at him, giving him the awfully uncomfortable impression she was looking straight into his mind. "I'd rather not be called that, really. Just Jenny Kennington. I don't think I did very well as a lady." "I imagine you did fine. Tell me about the night the necklace was stolen." She told him exactly the same story Carstairs had. "Of course, when we found Trevor had gone, we knew." "I see. There were a few other pieces of jewellery that had gone missing over the time Trevor Tree worked for your husband, apparently also taken by him. Would you remember them if you saw them again?" "Oh, yes." Quickly, she looked up at him. "You're not going to tell me you found those things, are you?" "No, but I think possibly Cora Binns knew Trevor Tree. I even think she might have been wearing a ring taken from Lord Kennington's collection." She looked at him, considering. Her green eyes darkened. "I'm awfully cold.
I'd like a cup of tea, would you?
I wouldn't mind.
I'll just get it then.
He missed her the moment she walked out of the room. The Bold Blue Boy was empty, save for Melrose and Emily Louise, which was not surprising, as it was barely 9 o'clock in the morning.
Why are you making that dog purple?
Because I like purple. Looking at the bizarre colours in her farmyard scene, and from there to Katie's map, smoothed out on the table before him, Melrose was reminded of Miss Craigie's diagrams. Something rankled. All those lines running and criss-crossing. He felt he should be able to dredge it up from his unconscious. His eyes slid back over Emily's colouring.
Make him get his own colouring book, Emily.
It was Jury's voice behind them.
What have you got there?
Melrose shoved the map from Katie O'Brien's book towards Jury, frustrated that the answer he'd been hoping for hadn't flashed into his mind, dazzling him with its brilliance. Jury studied the map for a few seconds, his face blank.
Where'd you get this?
Emily told him about Katie. In case anything happens. That's what she said? Emily nodded and gathered up her crayons and book.
I've got to be at the church fete at 10:30.
It was clear that, once having delivered her secret to the yard, she wanted no more to do with it. She made for the door, brushing by Peter Gear.
What's all this wizards business? Asked Melrose. This is the sort of map they do for a game. Hello, Peter. The Bodenheims are driving me daft over this fete, Gear said to Jury. How'd you do? He said when Jury introduced him to Melrose Plant. Have a look at this, Peter. Jury put the diagram before him. Gear studied it for a moment and frowned. What's this in aid of? Katie O'Brien, for one thing. And for another, maybe that necklace stolen from Lord Kennington a year ago. Peter stared at him, disbelieving. How? You said you'd seen Trevor Tree and Derek Bodenheim in here a few times playing a game called Wizards. Peter nodded. Doesn't this make you think of one of those diagrams? It could be, yes. Where'd you find it, then? I didn't. Katie O'Brien did. Whether she found it in London or Littlebourne, I don't know. Tell him, Mr. Plant. Melrose gave Peter Gear a full account of that morning's activities. Are you really suggesting Tree hid that emerald somewhere in the Horndean Wood? I don't know, Peter, but it's a bit too much of a coincidence. Katie O'Brien, Cora Binns, Trevor Tree. What's always puzzled me was how Tree nicked that emerald in the first place. There wouldn't have been time to get out and secrete it anywhere, and it wasn't on him. I searched the bastard. Well, there must have been someone, Peter, an accomplice, or at least someone who knew Tree had that emerald. That's eyewash, although Derek Bodenheim might just be low enough. I don't think it's eyewash, Peter. Katie's in hospital, and Cora Binns is dead. The church fete was scheduled to begin at noon, and already the spirited cries of what Melrose knew would be entirely too many children were reaching his ears. He was here supplying unasked for, and she had made it crystal clear, undesired aid to Emily Louise, who was readying horse and carriage for what Sylvia Bodenheim insisted on calling the phaeton rides, although it was a closed carriage. Melrose looked off into the Horndean Wood and saw in the distance a flash of a dark suit disappearing into a clump of trees. One of Carstairs' men. They were going about the business now of searching the wood not only for clues to the murder, but clues provided, or not provided, he was more inclined to think, by Katie O'Brien's map. There was another figure moving out there. Coming towards him was Peter Gear, wiping his face with a handkerchief. Nothing. No luck at all. God, he, meaning Jury, doesn't really think we can turn up every inch of ground and look in every goddamn hole and cave, does he? Does he think that emerald necklace is hanging from a branch, or what? He doesn't know. But if you were Superintendent Jury, wouldn't you have a go at it? Said Melrose. They had to step aside, for the first phaeton ride was returning, hell for leather.
Emily looked as if she might gladly grind Melrose and Peter into the dust beneath her wheels, her disgust with her charges being quite palpable. "Right little monster, isn't she?" said Peter Gear, accepting a cigarette from Melrose's gold case. "She'd give the black bear a good mauling, I'm sure." They stood there for 10 minutes, talking and staring into the wood. Melrose wondered if the Horndean wood was just the right metaphor for the whole puzzle. Too dense to see into or through. The voices of the children grew, like the sun itself, bright and coppery. To get away from it, Melrose decided to walk up to St. Pancras to have a look at the church that had inspired all of this activity. It was after he got to the church and turned on the rise of ground that he saw at a distance the woman in white and black standing at the gate, exchanging a few words with Peter Gear as she dug in her bag for change. Peter was apparently doing his stint, taking Miles Bodenheim's place at the admitting gate. The dress was quite striking, its black and white zebra stripes running diagonally from short silken sleeves to the bottom of the skirt. And the pallor of the skin was highlighted by the coal-black hair. He wondered who she was, as he watched her having a rather long conversation with Derek Bodenheim, erasing some of the slack look from Derek's face and replacing it with an intensity unusual for him. Melrose went inside the little church, where the air was deliciously cool and deliciously quiet. He spent some time in the church, staring out of the window. He was surprised when the bell tolled 4 o'clock. It was then that he heard the screaming. People were rushing in waves, yanking children along in the direction of the carriage parked in the shadow of the wood. And even as he looked, he thought he saw Emily Louise fall from her driver's perch. But Emily Louise Perk was too used to keeping a firm seat on a saddle to fall out of anything. She hadn't fallen, she'd jumped. The screams were issuing from some children, Melrose saw, once Peter Gear had managed to cut through the crowd. Melrose caught a glimpse inside the carriage. From the rug which was rolled up on the floor of the carriage dangled an arm, marble white, and, he guessed, marble cold. Nathan Ridley had been the first medical man on the scene, and had pronounced Ramona Way very dead indeed. From what Melrose could gather, the weapon was an antique, silver, awl-like object, once used for punching holes in canvas for needlework. It had, apparently, come from Sylvia Bodenheim's jumble table, and had been donated by Sylvia herself. She was none too pleased, now, with her generosity. Some distance from this latest Littlebourne murder, Jury was seated on the other side of Chief Superintendent Racer's desk at Scotland Yard. Racer was having a go at the game map, which Jury had produced for his inspection. He looked up from the map.
"So you've got the Hertfordshire police turning over every stick and stone in this god-forsaken wood, looking for a necklace."
Racer shoved the cat Cyril off his desk. The cat had been discovered one day walking through the halls of New Scotland Yard. No one knew how it had got in, but it had seemed determined on reporting something. Jury considered the cat had an ulterior motive in attaching itself to Chief Superintendent Racer, probably because Racer couldn't stand it. It liked to sit on Racer's desk, with its tail wrapped around its legs like an ornament, part of a matched desk set. Now it sat the same way on the floor, waiting its chance. "The necklace is only part of it," said Jury. "They're out there searching for clues to the murder of Cora Binns. What would you have me do, sir?"
"What would I have you do?"
He smiled slightly, and shoved himself back from his desk to get up and walk around the room. He could not resist talking down to Jury, literally as well as figuratively. As Racer droned on, Cyril made a 4-point landing on the desk and started washing.
"And what does forensics have to say about this?"
Racer was back at his desk now, holding up the map. "Nothing yet. They're sending round a report." Racer shoved Cyril off the desk as he switched on the intercom and asked Fiona Klingmore if the report had come up.
"Well, bring it in, for God's sakes, girl."
Fiona entered, all in her own good time. She cracked her wad of gum at her boss as she put a folder in front of him, at the same time giving Jury one of her high-voltage smiles. She was wearing a long-sleeved, high-necked black dress which strained across the bosom. It was held together by what seemed 100 little jet buttons and tiny loops running down the front. Jury watched Racer's eye travel the length of the button row. Then he tossed the folder over to Jury.
Nothing here we didn't know before. If you two are through making eyes at one another, get out, and take this moth-eaten cat with you. I'm busy.
All three were happy enough to leave. Only the cat Cyril would make it a point to come back. Ash Cripps, dressed in a faded bathrobe and rolling a cigar in his mouth, was strolling about the parlour, studying the map Jury had handed him. The Crippses' children were half in the kitchen eating mash, and half outside having a war with sticks and the tops of dustbins. Ash was waiting for White Ellie to get back from the launderette with his trousers.
Aye, it does look like something Trevor could have thought up, only it don't make no sense.
What do they usually? I thought the whole idea of wizards was to confuse and mislead.
Well, yeah, only... Well, look.
Ash was rummaging through the drawers of an old bureau, stopping now and then to yell through the door to the kitchen at the little bleeders to stop screaming. Finally, he slammed the door, dampening the noise only slightly. He handed Jury a map.
This is one Trevor did a couple of years ago. Make-believe village, where there was supposed to be treasure stashed.
The village was intricately drawn, and the two maps bore a marked similarity. The artwork seemed identical.
I seen others he did, like one of the necklace itself. Trevor had it all down, just like the pub looks. Tables and chairs and so forth.
He poked Jury's diagram.
That's what I say. This one's odd. It don't look like any place real. I mean, even real unreal.
As if on some bizarre cue, there came the sound of crockery breaking in the kitchen, and a window flying up behind Jury. The face of White Ellie appeared, shouting above the din of dustbin covers.
Won't you watch the bloody kids? Sammy and Suki's out here stark naked, and Friendly's having a piss on Mrs. Lilybank's roses again.
Then she saw Jury, and turned an even more thunderous brow on her husband.
You've been at it again.
The panes rattled as the window was flung down. Ash rolled his eyes heavenward as White Ellie, true to her name, stampeded into the parlour, shoving the pram before her. Atop the baby lay a huge mountain of clothes. Jury once again had the impulse to check and see if the baby was breathing.
No, I ain't been at it. And me and him's got business down at the Necklace, so if you'd kindly give me my trousers...
As White Ellie started to take them off, he said,
Wait a tick, I'm putting on me new strides. You ain't, them's for church.
As he walked into the back room, he said it again.
Putting on me new strides.
Fred Astaire couldn't have said it better, thought Jury 5 minutes later, as he and Ash promenaded down the street toward the Anodyne Necklace. If Jury had kept a memory book, the first entry would be the sight of White Ellie on the arm of Melrose Plant, outlined in the murky light of the door of the Anodyne Necklace. He had just hung up the telephone as they separated, White Ellie to join the bench-sitters, upsetting a pint as she squeezed between tables, and Plant to join Jury at the bar. Plant nodded towards the phone.
I take it you've just heard about Ramona Way.
Jury nodded. Plant put a note on the bar and beckoned to Harry Biggins. I've been wondering about the connection. If Ramona Way sold Lord Kennington that jewellery, is it possible she might have recognised a ring Cora Binns was wearing? Assuming she'd seen her, of course, in Littlebourne. That mention of Ramona Way and Cora Binns reminds me of something, Plant. While you buy me a pint of mild and bitter, I'm going to use the telephone again. While you're making your call, I'd like to have a try at the game over there. May I borrow your copy of Katie's map? Be my guest. Melrose ordered Jury's pint and gathered up his gloves and his stick. These he deposited on the large round table. All of them looked up at him with, he was sure, feigned surprise, as if they had not been keeping track of his every movement. All of them except for Dr. Chamberlain, who was either too smart or too vain to bother with this pretence. Which of you gentlemen is wizard master? Dr. Chamberlain held up a plump, pink forefinger and said with a certain amount of irony,
"And I have the honour of addressing who, sir?"
From his inside pocket, Melrose took a visiting card case, which he kept for emergencies. Dr. Chamberlain stuck his pince-nez on his nose, leaned over and read it, and then sat back, having difficulty in effecting the same indifferent manner.
"What's your concern with us?"
"Wizards. I'm a 13th degree wizard master myself." The rest of them all turned to Chamberlain, who looked rather unhappy.
They only go up to 15, Doc."
Melrose was glad he hadn't succumbed to the temptation to say 20th.
"That's very interesting,"
said Chamberlain, who was now concentrating, or pretending to, on a plate of jellied eel set before him by Biggins.
"But I repeat, what's it to do with us?"
"I'm interested in this." Melrose put the map on the table.
"It's the same map Superintendent Jury is interested in, but it's of no interest to me."
From his wallet, Melrose took some notes and spread them on the table. £500. Will that get me in the game?
"We don't play for money."
We don't play for anything else. What I propose is that if you can work out what this map means before I do, you keep the 500. All of you, of course.
Well, that's not much of a bargain for you, is it? I'm afraid you've caught us at a moment of financial embarrassment. We none of us can cover £500.
Well, that makes no odds. If I win, you'll count me in on the game whenever I'm in town.
I'm not sure I understand. If you're a friend of the superintendent, why didn't he come to you in the first place?
Oh, he did. I don't know what the map means. That obviously made Dr. Chamberlain happy.
I would have to make one stipulation.
Go ahead.
This place, Chamberlain stubbed his finger at the map, is probably imaginary, and you can't expect me to read Trevor Tree's mind. Therefore, I think we would have to let the wager stand on breaking the key.
What the hell was the key? Wondered Melrose. Very well, I accept. Money on the table had attracted most of the customers, including Jury, in the Anodyne Necklace. For the next 15 minutes, Melrose, seated with his piece of graph paper and his pencil, and not knowing what to do with either, was subjected to the most bizarre conversation he had ever heard. Occasionally, he doodled something on his paper, since he noted the others were all going at theirs, hammer and tongs. Chamberlain put down his pencil and looked across at Plant.
You surely must see it by now. You're a 13th degree master.
His perky little smile told Melrose that Chamberlain had won, or thought he had. When Melrose said nothing, he went on, pleased with himself.
The key here is obviously colours.
Perhaps you'd like to explain that, said Melrose, laying his stick across the 5 notes toward which a hand was moving.
The river of blood would obviously be red. Hardly a startling deduction. The Black Bear is rather clearly named, as are the Yellow Brick Road and the Blue Grotto. The footpath I'm uncertain about. Brown, perhaps. The moat would be green, and probably water green.
What about the King's Road?
Surely. Purple.
Chamberlain shrugged, looking from Plant to Jury.
Really, gentlemen, if I knew more, I'd tell you. But that's the key. I'm quite sure of it.
Melrose removed his silver-knobbed stick from the bills which Chamberlain collected, and, with surprising generosity, divided among the players. They stood beneath the sign of the Anodyne Necklace, looking down Catchcoach Street. "Colours," said Melrose Plant, lighting a small cigar. "What in the hell does that mean? If we only had Emily and her crayons. Anyway, was your telephone call fruitful?"
"Yes. What I remembered was, Ramona Way had been described by Sylvia Bodenheim as a jumped-up little secretary from London. Granted, there are plenty of little secretaries in London, but it would appear that only a few of them work, or worked, for the Smart Girls' Secretarial Service in King's Cross. According to its manager, Ramona Way was one of them,
until she left over a year ago when an old auntie died and Ramona was able to chuck the typewriter.
You mean she must have known Cora Binns?
Oh, yes. Well, I can hardly blame her for not wanting to admit it in the circumstances. Better if she had, though. And I think the main reason was to set her own little plan into action. Blackmail, I suppose. Poor, stupid woman.
You say this secretarial agency was somewhere near King's Cross?
Jury nodded. Why?
I just wondered, where's this Wembley Knots tube stop?
Not far. A few minutes away.
Could we have a look in, do you think?
Certainly. I have to be getting back to Littlebourne, though.
Yes, well, just for a minute.
Melrose dropped his cigar in the gutter and looked up at the sign of the Anodyne Necklace. Sawdust, gaslights, Chamberlain and Cripps. This place could live off chic for the rest of its life. They found her here, said Jury, stopping in front of the Evita poster, now further defaced by a long rip from the loose corner down through the centre. He turned to look at the wall where Melrose Plant was pointing with his walking stick. At that moment, their thoughts might have been packed together in one mind. Plant's stick traced the narrow red bar which split central London in two.
The River of Blood, wouldn't you say, Superintendent? The Central Line. Blue, Victoria Line. Black, Northern. Green, District. Let's have a look at your map.
Jury drew it from his pocket. The Church of St. Pancras had been drawn at the spot Plant had first pointed out.
He drew this little replica of the necklace directly above the approximate spot where we are now, Wembley Knots. You mean Tree hid it here? In a tube station?
Jury nodded and turned from the map of the Underground.
Could he have been dead wrong? It was difficult to believe it was Cyril McHenry.
Drop me at the hospital, will you, on your way back to Littlebourne?
Am I going back to Littlebourne?
Yes, to keep an eye on Emily Louise Perk. She was the one Katie gave the map to.
I'd feel, said Melrose, running up the moving stairs behind Jury, a lot safer if Emily Louise Perk would keep an eye on me.
Emily Louise Perk would almost rather have needles stuck in her fingernails than admit the happenings of the afternoon had made her extremely nervous. She felt she needed police protection, and Peter Gear did not seem too enthusiastic about giving it. Twice he had told her to leave the police station, that he was very busy. She looked at the last picture in her colouring book with distaste, slapped the book shut, and let her eye rove the room. What it was drawn to was the map, several copies of it, stuck to Peter's bulletin board with a drawing pin. When Peter Gear's back was turned, she hastily took down a copy and went back to her crayons. It would make a wonderful picture, coloured. She lined up the stubs of crayon and started in on the grotto, colouring it blue. After working for 2 or 3 minutes, she looked at the result. What did it remind her of? She frowned. Then, when she saw Peter get his coat, she stuck it in her colouring book. He would kill her if he knew she'd been at his bulletin board. She had strict orders never to touch it.
I've got to go to Hartfield, Emily, so take yourself home, there's a good girl. I'm supposed to feed the horses.
Well, go do it then. Though for you to be running round this late.
What's this in aid of?
Fatal. When she'd picked up the book, the map had slid out.
Emily, this is police evidence. What do you mean going and using it for colouring? It reminds me of something. I can't think what. It looks different coloured, doesn't it?
It doesn't look like anything to me except like some fool treasure map. What do you mean it reminds you of something? Emily screwed up her eyes and studied a moth floating above the ceiling light.
I'll think of it in a minute.
Don't you go playing that game with me now. I'm not about to fill you up with crisps and sweets. Peter herded her out the door, flashed her another dark look, got in his car, and sped off down the High. When he was out of sight, Emily sneaked back into the station, rescued the map, and smoothed it out. On the way to Rookswood, she stopped in at Polly Praed's, and was much more satisfied with the response there than at Peter's. It was Polly who had taken her to the London Zoo and let her ride all over the city on the Underground. To say nothing of the response, amounting to several fresh cream cakes, this latest revelation earned her in the Rookswood kitchen. Only a slant of murky light showed through the partially open stable door where Emily was in Shandy's box. As she started to unbuckle the saddle, the stable door slowly shut, cutting off what light there was. Although she might have been afraid in her own room in the dark, she had never felt afraid in the stable. It had always been her sanctuary. She was afraid now. Emily could hear the thrust of the outside bolts on each box door being shot. Someone was locking her in. She pulled her knees right up to her chest, scarcely breathing. The person was now methodically inspecting each one of the boxes. Emily moved quietly to Shandy's side, hoisted herself up on the pony's back, and waited. She heard the bolt shoot back, saw the light from a torch stream across the horse's flank, just missing her, saw it searching the corners of the stall. "Go," she whispered in the pony's ear. Shandy exploded from the stall, leaving behind someone, she thought happily, who must now be lying in the dirt. Emily was across the cobbles and onto the drive in less than a minute. Another minute, and she could have cut across the grass to the house, but obviously she couldn't go there for help, because whoever it was in the stable could easily have come from there. To get to the high, she could ride through the gate at the end of the drive. Too late, she remembered the gate was shut. She'd been directed always to lock it behind her. Could she take the chance that the person, could it be anyone but nasty Derek, wouldn't grab her the moment she stopped to unlock the gate? It came down to one choice. The Horndean would. As she galloped along the wall, the noise of hooves behind her thundered in her ears. When she reached the scattering of trees that began the wood, she veered onto an old bridle path and slowed Shandy to a trot. Somewhere behind her, she heard the other horse gallop by. Now she couldn't keep going ahead, because the rider would be up there, and if he were already starting back toward Rookswood, then doubling back might be the worst of all. He could leave false trails. The words of Superintendent Jury came back to her, just as she heard the sounds of the returning rider. It was as if Jimmy Poole, before he got so sick and almost died, she was sure, were out here trying to tell her what to do. Quickly and quietly she moved Shandy to a section of the wall, climbed up on his back, balanced herself carefully, and clambered up on the wall. From her neck she took the towel which she'd used to wipe down the tack, let it fall on the wall, where it caught on a protruding vine. Good. It looked like it got caught there as she went over. She walked along the wall a few feet, caught hold of the lower branch of a tree, and swung herself up. She didn't have to wait long. There was a thrashing through the branches and bracken, and the thin beam of a torch searched the outline of trees before it. For the first time in her life, Emily Louise Perk's curiosity hadn't got the best of her. She was frozen to the tree, her face pressed against it, unbreathing. She knew she should have looked down, but she couldn't. Emily Louise had cried 3 times in her life. Once when her father had gone, once when her cat had died, once when Katie O'Brien had gone into the hospital. This was the 4th time, and she was crying because she knew Jimmy Poole wouldn't have been that much of a coward. The person had gone. Emily climbed down from the tree onto Shandy's back and made for the end of the wall and the Hartfield-Horndean road. Soon she could make out the row of lights from the rear of cottages along Littlebourne High Street. Emily was so exhausted that she just lay her face down on Shandy's mane and let him walk on. In the distance, she heard a car. It drove past her, a dark blur in the night. Her mind went blank with fear when she heard it stop a distance from her and reverse in the narrow road. And then she knew. She turned and started Shandy at a canter and quickly changed to a gallop. Shandy was fast, at least with Emily riding, but no horse in the Bodenheim stable was fast enough to outrun a car. She'd better outrun it, if she wanted to live through the night. The car was still some distance behind her. She slowed the horse to a walk, took off her tweed coat, and stuck the arms, one each side, through the loops of the bridle. She could hear the car gaining. Emily slid off and yelled, "Go!" and slapped his rump. Shandy broke into a gallop, the fluttering coat atop the saddle. Just as the beam from the headlights illuminated the legs of the pony, Emily fell back through the hedge, crying and hating herself. What a traitorous thing to do to Shandy. With the help of 2 London Transport Security Police, jury found the necklace. It had been wrapped in a thin, dark handkerchief and fed through the opening in a floor-level ventilation grate, directly across from where Katie O'Brien had slumped, where it had lain on a ledge, collecting the soot of the whole last year.
"Kill you?"
exclaimed Melrose Plant to the bedraggled bit of child standing before him in the bold blue boy. Emily nodded, frowning at the floor, her mouth downturned, prelude, Melrose thought, to a fit of tears, although it was hard to imagine Emily crying.
"I want to find Mr. Jury."
"At the moment he's in London. I expect he'll be back very soon. As a matter of fact, he wanted me to keep an eye on you." The look now told him what a bang-up idea she thought that was. "Come on." He dragged her over to the turnstile of crisps, went behind the little bar himself, and got out the lemon squash. If her mouth was full, she'd forget her misery.
"Who knew where you were?" "Lots of people. I always feed the horses Sunday nights. Here."
The coloured map, now damp, muddy and wrinkled, had been in her pocket all along. She showed it to Melrose. He looked from the map to her. "When did you do this?" She told him, while rooting out the last crisp from the bag.
"Did you show it to anyone?" "To Polly. We figured out what it was. It's the underground. Why would anyone want to do a map like that of the underground?"
"Did you tell anyone else?" Emily had made a ball of the empty crisp bag and was bouncing it in the air.
"Stop that and pay attention."
She frowned mightily and slid down in her chair.
"You needn't be nasty. I only told Mrs. Lark."
The Bodenheim cook. Wonderful. She, no doubt, immediately told all of the family. He looked at Emily, wondering what to do. Young ladies in distress had never been Plant's métier. Emily's mother seemed to be, as usual, unavailable. He hadn't seen Mary O'Brien. Polly prayed? He suggested it.
"No, I don't want to talk to anybody."
"You're talking to me?"
"That's different."
Either that meant he wasn't anybody, or that he had been admitted to that very select company thus far comprised of Superintendent Jury and whatever horses happened to be about. "Well, I'm glad to know you trust me." Her look would have turned anyone more unused to her to stone.
"Only because you're a stranger, and you don't ride horses, so it wasn't you."
Implying that in any other circumstances he'd have all the makings of the born killer. "You don't think it could have been Polly?" Emily didn't answer.
"But that's—"
He wanted to say ridiculous, but it stuck in his throat.
"It's why I didn't want to come in through the front. I don't know who's out there."
"Well, you can stay here the night. I'm sure Mary O'Brien can find you a nightie."
"Nightie? I don't wear those. I sleep in my knickers."
Melrose got up. "I'm going to call the police."
"I'll only talk to that Scotland Yard man."
"He's in London. I'll call Hartfield. Maybe Peters."
"Mr. Jury, and no one else."
Mr. Jury was, shortly after this exchange, talking to 6 other policemen, Wiggins among them, who had been routed from their Sunday evening activities to assemble in the Wembley Knots underground station.
"Nasty," said Detective Inspector Graham. "But what makes you think this villain will come back here tonight?"
"Because our friend knows that there's not much time, that's why. Ever since Katie O'Brien found that map, the whole thing must have been pretty nerve-wracking. 2 women dead, and another one in a coma. Don't tell me this person's going to wait around for us to find the bloody necklace."
"Then he's got exactly 1 hour and 33 minutes before this tube stop closes down."
Detective Inspector Graham stopped at the sound of the echoing footsteps coming round the curve of the wall. It was Cyril McHenry, carrying a violin case. He kept his eyes down, as if he was searching for something. Jury introduced him to the assembled company. "Our itinerant musician. We've cleared the place out, not that it took much clearing, and the only ones here now are you," he looked the group over, And Cyril, Katie's teacher. I think it should be business as usual, and the thing that will make our friend least suspicious is if there's someone playing down here. As far as I'm concerned, it's only poetic justice." Jury looked at Cyril McHenry, who did not reply. He'd agreed to play his violin, but with some resistance, answering Jury in monosyllables when Jury had got hold of him at the hospital. Temporary Detective Constable Turwit, who was leaning against the wall, dressed in leather coat, Hawaiian shirt and jeans.
"So, there's 2 of us on the platform, not counting you 2, 1 of us in the tunnel, and 1 on the moving stairs. You're sure this creep knows where that necklace is?"
"I'm pretty sure," said Jury, handing round the photo he'd brought with him. "That's who you're looking for." After they'd all had the picture, Graham passed it back.
"Nasty. Very nasty. I'd sooner suspect my old gran."
"Be glad it isn't your old gran. You might wake up with no fingers." They were standing around the curve from the Evita poster, out of sight of the grate. McHenry had the violin tucked beneath his chin. He plucked a string, stared at the wall and said, "Katie's dead. She died just before you called."
"I don't believe it," said Jury.
McHenry plucked a string of his violin. "Neither do I." As he drowned himself in music, Jury stared for a moment, and then walked back down the corridor towards the platform. They sat, Wiggins and Jury, in a murky corner at the end of the platform. 2 passengers got off the next train and left through the exit that led up to the little bridge and out the other side of the Wembley Knots station. After 40 minutes, and thinking that he must be wrong, that nothing was going to happen that night, Jury heard the first strains of the song McHenry had said he'd play as a signal, one of Katie's favourites, "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina." Jury signalled to Graham and the other detective sergeant. TDC Turwit was stationed in the corridor, ostensibly to listen to the violin, and then to follow the suspect at a respectful distance. The 4 of them, Graham, the DS, Jury and Wiggins, went through the archway to the short flight of stairs and down. Jury heard Turwit commanding,
"Hold it right there, mate."
The person frozen in a crouch by the grate was now looking from Turwit, gun levelled, to the others bearing down on him. "Hello, Peter," said Jury. Peter Gear had the handkerchief-wrapped necklace in his hands. "I should have bloody known. The minute I heard that goddamn song, I should have known. It was the same one she was playing that afternoon." "Why did you kill Katie O'Brien, Peter? Did you think she knew what that map meant?"
I didn't kill her. Just roughed her up a bit. She found the map when she was cleaning one day. Like a bloody idiot, I forgot to lock the desk drawer. Nosy little lass that girl was. I overreacted. She gave me a funny look and went away. But then she came back. She got at it again by taking out the drawer on the other side. Well, I couldn't have her see me in Wembley Knot Station, could I?
And you wanted to take everyone's mind off Katie's accident, so you wrote those letters.
It worked, didn't it? Anyway, I didn't kill her. She's in hospital.
She's dead. Gear went ashen. Jury knew, while the awful news was sinking in, that he had the advantage.
What about Cora Binns? Did you know she was Tree's lady friend? Or was she wearing some of Kennington's jewellery? What a fool Trevor was to give her those rings. She'd got off the bus and was searching for Stonington. Said she had business with Lady Kennington. How the bloody hell was I to know what her business was? I didn't know how much she knew or how much Tree had told her. And there she was, with that jewellery that Kennington's widow was bound to recognise. I could hardly talk it off her fingers.
All of this was brought out in a rush, like a man fighting for oxygen, before he seemed to realise how much talking he was doing.
What about Ramona Way?
Gear didn't answer, and Jury turned away. Get him the hell out of here. As Graham was about to put cuffs on Peter Gear, a train pulled in and disgorged a couple of passengers, a woebegone woman dragging a 4 or 5-year-old girl. The mother seemed unaware of this phalanx of men and commenced ploughing straight through them. Jury could not see how anyone could have been that quick, but Peter grabbed up the little girl and backed off with her. unwilling to use their guns. No one was close enough to get to Gear before he was out of the exit door leading up to the bridge. Jury raced after him and reached the bridge as the train began to move. He yelled to Gear that there were police at the other exit too. Gear looked around desperately and suddenly thrust the child forward. Jury grabbed her as Gear went crashing through the makeshift barrier, hoping, apparently, to ride the top of the train. He missed the last car by inches and hit the track. Jury looked down and was glad transport security hadn't mentioned the voltage on the outside rail. When Jury found Melrose Plant at 2 o'clock in the morning, he was sitting with an overflowing ashtray, a bottle of Remy, and a book of French poetry. He sat down heavily. "Let me have some of that, will you?" Melrose shoved the bottle toward him. Then he told him about Emily Louise. "Oh, my God! And how's Mary O'Brien?" "Dr. Ridley gave her some sort of sedative. I suppose it worked for a while, since he managed to get her upstairs and into bed. There's no such thing as being prepared for death. I'm glad I never saw her." He looked at Jury, as if half afraid Jury might tell him about Katie O'Brien. Jury said nothing, and Melrose went on. "When Ridley told me about Peter Gear, I was baffled. He was Tree's accomplice? It occurred to me that the person spot on was Peter Gear, wasn't it? How simple can you get? The village bobby gets called straight away, and he calls Hartfield police, and he's the one who searches Trevor Tree. He said so himself. He could have either just left the necklace in Tree's dressing-gown pocket, or palmed it himself and put it in his own and given it back to Tree later." "What about Ramona Way?" Jury shook his head. Gear stopped talking at that point. Ramona Way must have known Cora Binns. Maybe she knew the death of Cora had some connection with the emerald. "And what would make Peter Gear think of the grate as a hiding place?" Peter Gear once worked for London Transport. He mentioned it in relationship to that letter he'd got, written to himself, that is. Skullduggery, when he worked for LT, he said. So he might think of it quicker than you or me. Jury poured himself another cognac. They sat there for another 10 minutes, passing the bottle back and forth, and talking about everything they could think of, except Katie O'Brien. Most of Littlebourne seemed to have converged on the magic muffin, muffins and tea being considered, presumably, not quite so celebratory as ale and beer. The Bold Blue Boy was closed, at any rate, leaving the 11 o'clock tipplers without much choice. Fortunately, Melrose noted, Polly Praed was one of them. "Everyone is simply astounded, Mr. Plant. Did you guess it was Peter Gear?" She was leaning toward him, her glasses scooped up on top of her head, her eyes shining with a mixture of excitement and sadness. "No, I didn't. I was wondering, Polly, and Emily, my God, going after a poor little girl like that." Melrose nodded, though he found it very difficult to think of Emily Louise as a poor little girl. "Yes, absolutely dreadful. I thought perhaps—" "I always liked Peter Gear. He seemed so mild, unassuming, the very picture of the village bobby. Polly, well, I suppose you'll be leaving now it's all over." Although he was delighted she had finally given him an opportunity to extend his invitation, he was less than delighted that her tone, when she said this, was hardly one of sadness, not even one of resignation. "Yes, tomorrow, after the funeral. I thought perhaps sometime, when you weren't in the throes of your latest attempt to kill off the Bodenheims, you might consider visiting me at Ardry End. I suppose you have heaps of money." "Heaps?" "That's very nice of you, but I don't know. I never go anywhere, really. Travel is all in the mind, isn't it?" He did not attempt to answer that conundrum. "We used to have a mystery writer in Long Piddleton. He's gone now," Melrose added, hinting that the vacancy was open. But her mind was, apparently, still on the subject of money. "I wonder how much policemen make." She studied her muffin. "Oh, hell," thought Melrose. She must have been watching from one of the windows, for Jenny Kennington opened the door before Jury reached it. "Lady Kennington, I've come to—" "I know why. Inspector Carstairs rang me late last night. It's awful. I couldn't believe. I didn't know Peter Gere very well at all. Once again, she led him to the small room. Jury felt a twinge of regret when he saw the flowered, chintz-covered chair was gone. He had not realized until just then how it must have hung in his mind like a picture, that arrangement, the chair, the shawl, the teacup on the floor.
And Katie O'Brien's dead, too.
Yes, said Jury, bringing out the necklace. This is yours. There was nothing for her to do now but hold out her hands, cupped like someone taking a drink from a stream. He dropped the emerald into it. She held it up, turning it in the light. 4 people died because of this.
Well, don't be stupid about it.
She looked at him, surprised. I mean, it's yours. It belongs to you. If you don't want to wear it, then hand it over to Sotheby's or someone and let them auction it off. With that kind of money, you won't have to leave. Her cool eyes appraised him.
I get the feeling you think I'm not properly grateful.
Believe me, I am. I don't expect you to be grateful. I expect you to take proper care of yourself, though. He turned away, feeling irrationally angry. Oh, was all she said. Her hands fooled with the clasp of the necklace, which he then placed around her neck. Jury had no idea why he felt so cross. Indeed, he was moved to give her another brief lecture, but was saved from such foolishness by the doors creaking open at the other end of the room and a reincarnated Tom entering. The black cat sat in the middle of the floor, slowly washing his face, as if its brush with death were a long-faded memory.
The cat's back already?
Yes. It wasn't as bad as the vet had thought, but it was still expensive. Jury pointed to the necklace.
That'll pay a lot of vet's bills.
She fingered it, smiling.
It's rather pretty, isn't it? My late husband told me that emeralds were valued for one reason, because they're the colour of vegetation. Regeneration, that sort of thing. They were related to the flooding of the Nile and the restoration of life.
Well, the cat certainly looks restored. Maybe that's a good sign.
She looked at the cat. He was squinting up at them as if it needed glasses.
Ugly old thing, isn't it?
Yes, said Jury, smiling. Too bad you don't like it.
Polly Praed was not the only one concerned with how much money policemen make. Emily Louise Perk pondered precisely the same question as she was carrying Shandy that Monday afternoon, only she was more transparent than Polly Praed. Emily wanted to know how much a superintendent of police made.
Why don't I just subpoena Superintendent Jury's bank account?
Asked Melrose from his seat on a bale of hay. The sarcasm fell wide. Emily continued her discussion of the relative merits and cost of different kinds of horses.
A truly good horse can cost thousands of pounds, but of course I don't want race horses or anything like that.
That's lucky for the superintendent. Give him time to pay off his car. A bright pink balloon, relic of Sunday's church fete in Littlebourne, had eluded the clean-up crew. As the service continued, Jury watched it being buffeted by breezes which mowed through the graveyard grasses, bounding and floating upwards and off into the Horndean wood. There had been more villagers in the church of St. Pancras itself than were gathered here now. Jury was surprised to see Derek Bodenheim looking, for a change, strained rather than bored. The rest of the family had stayed at home. It was just as well. Mainwaring had come with a blonde woman who must have been his wife, rather pretty, unstylish, and with a face too expressionless for even simulated grief. And Emily Louise, who had up to the last refused to come with her mother, was still there, back in the wood, camouflaged by branches and leaves, up on her pony. She would not come nearer, but she still participated. Her velvet cap was off, held in the circle of her arm like a Queen's guardsman might have held his tall hat. Jury, Melrose Plant, and Wiggins stood bunched to one side, as if unsure of their business there, and farther back, by herself, and perhaps even more unsure, stood Jenny Kennington. Their heads were bowed as the vicar of St. Pancras commended the body of Katie O'Brien to the ground. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. When the coffin was lowered, a thickly veiled Mary O'Brien stepped forward and let fall from her hand a fistful of earth. The other mourners followed suit, circling the grave, each stopping to scoop a handful of black earth, letting it trickle onto the lid of the coffin. It reminded Jury of some terribly sad version of a children's game. He saw Emily turn her pony and disappear into the trees. He still stood there as the others dispersed, beginning their procession downhill. He was watching Jenny Kennington. She was standing some distance off, as if waiting for everyone to leave. Jury stayed. Finally, she walked to the graveside and gathered up a handful of earth and let it fall on the coffin. She raised her fingers to her forehead, and at first he thought she was about to cross herself, but she didn't. Instead, she smiled slightly and sketched a tiny salute in the air. And then she walked away.
The lights are low, the evening slow. A gentle hush falls on the room. Some truths are spoken, some are kept beneath the surface of perfume. We smile and laugh, we play the game, but every word is carefully weighed. Behind the charm, behind the grace, there's something delicate and frayed. Quiet lies, floating softly through the night. Quiet lies, hidden just beneath the light. We hold them close, we let them breathe. In every smile, in every leaf. The clock keeps time with steady hands, while secrets drift like falling sand. One careless word, one knowing glance can change the course of circumstance. We dance around the things unsaid, with perfect manners, perfect poise. But in the silence, in the pause, we hear the truth behind the noise. Quiet lies, floating softly through the night. Quiet lies, hidden just beneath the light. We hold them close, we let them breathe. In every smile, in every drifting gently out of sight.